Hey everybody, welcome to an episode of Backlog Crew. Today we're going to be talking about Mortal Shell, and I'm John, in case we haven't met before. And then here with me is also Ryder and Kurt.
Hello, hello.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started today with Mortal Shell. This is an action RPG developed by Cold Symmetry, and it was published by PlayStack. And actually, in doing some research for this video, it turns out that a core team of 15 people actually made this game, and it was originally called Dungeon Haven. And it's quite funny. It's exe, the actual what runs the application in the game. It still has that name. If you go look in your folders, it's still called Dungeon
Oh,
Haven.
really?
Yeah,
That's
so
interesting.
because I had to add it to Steam from Epic Games to use my controller, and it shows up as Dungeon Haven. So there you go.
Cool.
Just fun little tidbit there. But
Uh, Also,
mhm,
real quick, I just
yeah.
on the subject of how many people helped develop the game. So it was 15 people after it was picked up by a publisher and they were given more money. Originally, it was a team of five who made
Wow.
like the vast majority of the game, and then they picked up another 10 people after a publisher picked them up and gave them a little bit more
Crazy
money
that a
because they.
game that looks this good
Hmm.
can be made by a group this small.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And there's actually a speed run, and you can watch the developers react to it on YouTube, and it's like a 30-minute speed run. It made me feel bad after how much time it took me to beat it,
Is it
but
like a glitch speedrun?
yeah,
Has to
it's
be.
stuff to get you around a lot quicker. But
Oh my
anyway,
gosh.
I digress on that one. So the main premise of our game here, it's a Souls-like, I would say for sure, and I
Mm-hmm.
believe they got some inspiration from that. I don't even think they hid that from anybody, but so you start off as the main character, which is called the Foundling, and you're a very organic looking individual to say the least, where you just come out
A
of
little
a
naked dude.
yeah, exactly. And you just are laying in a big puddle of water in some mist to start off, and yeah, you just walk around a tutorial area, and yeah. So what did y'all think about this tutorial? What did you expect coming into the game, actually? I'll let anyone take that.
So I started the game. So I think we all played this on PC. I'm assuming we all use
I
the
did
Epic Games
PS5.
store. Okay, yeah. So love it or hate it, we got this game for free from Epic Games. So that's, I mean, awesome. We talked about doing this game for a little while, and that made that much
I also
easier for us.
purchased it.
Yeah, he purchased it. I'm supporting the creators by playing it for free legally this time, all the time.
We're giving
But
them free publicity right now.
so whenever I opened the game, I went ahead and because a lot of games don't have native support for PS4 controllers for whatever reason, and it's gotten a lot better in recent years. But I went ahead and just preemptively opened up an app that allows me to map my PS4 controller as an Xbox controller. And so I had my PS4 controller set up as an Xbox controller and was thinking this is miserable. There's no way I'm going to finish this game. But I had so much trouble with the tutorial area because the Xbox controller configuration was conflicting with this because
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
apparently this does have native support and I was causing way more issues than I realized. So initially I was like, this sucks. This is absolutely horrible. What were they thinking? And then after like I was like, wait a minute. I turn off the application and all of a sudden all my controls switch over to instead of A B X Y, it switches over to
The correct one.
yeah, like the
Yeah.
actual PlayStation controls was like, oh, okay. But the tutorial was cool. It introduced me to mechanics I did not expect, hardening and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, Things that like I was expecting this to be closer to Souls like game or Soulsborne games in
Right.
combat, and I won't go into that yet. But I think it's a pretty good tutorial to get you started, at least introduce you to these mechanics, to teach you this is not Dark Souls. Do not
Right.
play it like Dark Souls.
You could not. Yeah, I agree with that. But
Yeah,
what about
that
you,
took
Kurt?
me a little bit of time to figure out because it looks the most like Dark Souls of any of the Souls likes. But the lack of blocking and the use of like the
Yeah.
hardening mechanic, which just holds you completely still and negates all damage, but you can't move, and then you can kind of respond from that. And at first, you try to, or at least I tried to treat it like it was a block,
Yeah.
and I would just
Hmm.
harden block and then keep attacking. But then you get better and better with it, and it was super cool. Like just going in on somebody with a huge combo, and they're not taking hit stun or anything, so they're about to hit me, and I just harden, they ricochet, and
And
then I
keep
just
going at
continue
it.
my combo like nothing happened.
Right.
You learn to flow. It's like a dance
Hmm.
almost, like
That's
Mm-hmm.
how I
because
thought about it.
it's like swing, roll, swing, harden, hit, roll back, swing, and like
And then
especially
yeah.
once you start getting like mixing the shells in and
Mhm.
learning how those abilities work with harden, it the combat flows really well once you learn it.
Yeah, so speaking of shells, after we make it through this tutorial area, we fight, I believe name is
Pattern.
Artem?
Pattern,
Hattern?
pattern.
Yeah, we fight Hattern. Uh-oh.
Hey Zach, you want to be on our show?
What are you doing?
We're recording a Backlog Crew episode, and John's gonna censor that out.
No, no, it's gotta stay there. What's up, man?
You guys are on general, so I was like, hey, what are these guys palling around?
No, you can hang out if you want. You'll just
Yeah,
get
do you wanna
tons
be
of
on the
spoilers
show?
for it.
No, man, I'm making a quesadilla. I'll see you
Okay.
guys tomorrow.
This is awesome.
Yeah,
This
send us a
is-
picture. We'll throw it up on the screen.
I have half of Zach's face and Ryder's couch.
Ooh,
Ooh.
quesadilla. All right,
I
bye.
love that. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Bye.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
I was worried that was gonna happen, but I thought the odds were too low.
We've been doing this for like 2 years now, and it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
So
It's posted in a channel that he can see that we're doing this today. Like
it's okay.
it's
All
fine. I
right.
think that's hilarious.
So, Hattern, is that his name? Hattern?
I said
call it
Hattern, but
Hattern. All right. As long as we're consistent. All right. So Hattern is your tutorial boss. You don't actually have to beat him to move forward. Did any of you miraculously beat this man? The
No, I
first
was still-
tutorial.
no.
I had improper. I had him down to about a third of his health, and I was doing that with my crappy Xbox
Control
controls
setup.
on this.
Yeah.
And I was like, should I read it? Because after I lost against him, I was like, turned it off and was like, oh wait, oh man. I thought about restarting it to
Yeah.
try and do it with PS4 controls, but I was like, it's not even worth it because
No.
I'm assuming it's either something you have to lose to, or you get like maybe a small item that'll help you out if you do win.
I actually have that for you. I know what the item
Okay.
is. Gives you
What do you get?
15 glimpses. It's some item that you can break and
That's
get 15
pretty
of them.
good.
Yeah, if you beat him. So,
I was trying to beat him on my first fight because a lot of times in games they throw you in and are like, no, you're gonna lose this for story purposes.
right.
But in Dark Souls, you have always ended up defeating the first boss, even if like the Asylum Demon in the very first one, you're supposed to avoid it at first and then you come back and fight it.
Hmm.
But like the boss fight had started and there was no way for me to escape. So I got a little scared that I was going to have to somehow overcome this initial obstacle to move
Get
on.
good.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah,
it was
there's
a
a-
relief.
Gundyr or Iodex Gundyr
Yeah.
from Dark Souls 3. That was a great introduction to that game because it's like, no, you're gonna get good. Either you beat him and play the rest of the game, or be stuck here like 30% of losers who
brother.
never beat this guy. Yeah, and you go look at the
I gave
Steam
him Dark Souls 3
achievements.
for Christmas.
Yeah.
We unpacked it. He played it, got to that boss, tried it like 6 times, and was like, "You can just take this home with you, man. I don't.
Yeah.
It's okay."
My cousin, who I watched play through that first boss, at this point he's beaten Dark Souls 3 a few times, but originally when I had him try it, he was like, there has to be a way to get around this. You don't have to do this. I said, actually, yes, you do. And now he's beaten the game like a few times, so funny how it works out. But so you fight off Hattern, sorry, and
Either
consistency.
way.
And then we move on to the main area and we encounter our first shell. This is Eros the Vessel, I believe, which is a well-rounded shell. Whenever you inhabit one of these shells, you take on their physical characteristics. You actually take over their body, the shell. You're no longer that squishy guy. Instead, you have armor on, and you get their characteristics as well: their health, their stamina, and their third stat that I can't recall off the top of my head. Resolve, I believe.
Resolve.
Resolve, yeah.
Okay. And then you are put into the big world of Fulgrim to begin your adventure. So, I guess with that we can talk about Fulgrim a little bit. What did you guys think about Fulgrim?
I thought it was cool looking. I'm always a big fan of like a nice swamp kind of atmosphere, and this
Right.
definitely had that. Is at first were kind of overwhelming just because there were so many of them.
Mm.
The
The
there
main
wasn't a linear path, at least an obvious linear path to your next destination, like there tends to be in like early Souls-like
right,
areas. So I wandered around for a long
right.
time just getting my butt whooped and dying again and again. But it did force me to get a little bit better at the combat.
Well, for Fulgrim, we haven't mentioned it yet, but this is the basically your hub world. Um, it's where all the spokes come together for the big circle of the world, and the actual hub would be Fulgrim Tower, which is basically right in the center. It's where all of your additional shells you find are going to go. Your additional weapons are going to be stored there. You're going to have the wonderful lady that I can't recall her name there. Your
Sister Ganessa.
sister
Sister.
Ganeth.
Sister Ganessa. Yeah, they changed a lot of
Yes.
letters and a lot of words, seemingly randomly.
As well as the item shop, everyone's favorite cat that you can pet every time you go to the item shop, and then of
Sorry,
course,
there's a cat.
yes, and a shop, and of
I found the
course
shop. I did not find the cat.
He's
the
almost invisible.
oh, mhm,
He's just like, I'm not gonna say he blends in, but he if you're just kind of like running up to the guy and talking to him real fast, you'll miss him. And there's the cue to actually pet him when it gives you like a little like, oh yeah, here, hit A or X or whatever. It pops up so quickly. And
Hmm.
I saw it pop up like as I was running by. I was like, oh hey cat, and
Yeah, I did not
then
see a
he
cat
gave
at
him
all.
pet.
he
Yeah,
has he has a black cat right by the right by the table, but
the animation's really cute
right,
because he like the cat's like, hey, what are you doing?
and he's like,
And
wait a
then
minute,
you're like, yeah, give me a pet, come on.
and we also have the anvil where you can upgrade your weapons there, and the chained prisoner, I believe, is also there. So, whenever you make it to Fulgrim Tower after you've explored however much you want of Fulgrim, you could probably play through most of the game, if not all of the game, without going there if you wanted to. Why? I don't know. But you could if you wanted to, because it's very open world, like Kurt said. Doesn't really provide too much directions. You could go explore as much as you want.
They do give, I have it written down. They're called something.
Like a glimpse or a.
Sense instincts is
Mhm.
what they're called. You find like little statues that have like sort of a glow on them, and it kind of shows you a premonition of where you should go.
Right,
And that's really cool. And it definitely came in handy a few times once I got more familiar with the world. At first, it was like, this is just a bunch of random places that I
right.
don't, that this doesn't help me. But it is helpful. It's also really nauseating. Like, I was very dizzy trying to watch. There's one in particular I watched over and over again, trying to figure out where I was supposed to go next. It made me sick, just the visual effects they had on the screen.
That's fair. It does seem like a flashback kind of thing whenever you're taking a look. I mentioned that the shells are stored here. Well, you can see where the shells should go, and they show you, like you had said, premonitions like of where they are located and what paths they'd taken before they had fallen, as well as
Hmm.
the weapons as well. And so you could actually use those to go collect them if you if you were lucky enough to remember everything of where it was.
Mhm.
Did you guys find all the shells?
Yes.
I did not find the thief shell.
Okay. Well, that brings
That's the most
us
interesting one.
Oh, is it
Uh,
really?
that brings
Oh
us to
well.
the to
Yeah.
what I was going to bring up next. The old prisoner tells you to go and collect what are they called?
The glands.
The
Glands.
glands.
The
Well,
sacred glands.
I had no idea where to do that, so I just looked where all the bodies were in
Hmm.
their premonitions, and I was like, oh, that's right over there. I'll go grab that real quick. And so the first thing I did was go grab the thief one, I believe, and
Oh,
that
that was the
was
first one you got?
pretty sure. What's his name?
His name is
Teal, the acolyte.
Hill.
yeah, Teal.
Wait,
Oh
no,
yeah, I guess he's an
Solomon.
acolyte, not really.
Wait, no,
Mm,
no. You're right. You're right. Solomon's a scholar.
yeah,
Yes,
Solomon's a
yes.
scholar.
So, I believe Teal the acolyte is located past Grisha, your first mini boss. Is that correct?
That's where I found Solomon.
Oh, whoops.
Thing is that so the Grisha. So, okay, so I think we need to rewind
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
let's
for
because
it.
rewind.
Hmm.
so I'm stopping this just for a sec because I think for anyone who does watch this, they need to know that we originally talked about recording this in 2 halves
Mm-hmm.
after playing through first half of the game and second half of the game. And I was like, hey, I don't think we should do that because I don't think this is enough. And
Mm-hmm.
this is why I think that this is important because you say Grisha, was it Grisha?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
Grisha.
Grisha, right? Was first boss. While I did fight him, I did not beat him
Oh,
because I was like, well, I fought him once. It was like, hey, it's a little too hard. Let me explore a little more first.
actually
I
Valid.
lied
think
anyway.
I think that the map design, I'm not gonna say it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say I don't like it. Specifically Fulgrim. I think it's complicated.
Yeah, it's very.
For sure.
It's confusing. And I know that it's not. This is not a Soulsborne game. It's a Souls-like. However,
Mm-hmm.
I can't help but compare because it's so similar. And
Right.
thinking about something like Dark Souls 1, which we've kind of mentioned before, you have Firelink Shrine, which is the hub, just like the tower is kind of your hub. You have the Firekeeper there versus Sester Janessa. Um, but you know, Dark Souls, when everything connects back to itself, you're like, oh my gosh, wow, that makes so much sense. But there's a fairly linear path to begin with, and I think they had the benefit of having a bigger team, and it's a longer game in general,
Mm-hmm.
so they could, allow for more interconnectivity and a bigger map. But like this, I feel like it was just looping back, looping back, looping back. And again, it's a shorter game, so like there's only so much you can do with the amount of space given and stuff like that. But I went a completely different direction,
Okay.
and I ended up in the crypt fighting against enemies that were way above my level.
Right.
All I had was Horus as
Mhm.
my shell. I
Mhm.
had no upgrades other than the kick, and I went down in there and I fought against, I guess actually technically Hattern with the Martyr's Blade was my first real boss fight. I fought him and then went down there and ended up fighting Tarsus.
Did you
Apparently,
beat Hatter?
yeah, I beat Hattern.
Oh,
I
nice.
beat Hattern without anything, and then I went further down, killed the enslaved Grisha, and on like
The
my
harder one.
first try, and then went down even further, and then fought Tarsus like 7 times before eventually I beat him. And it was like, this game is hard. This game is very hard. I don't get why it's so hard. And then after I finished the game, I looked it up and like, oh yeah, he's like the hardest boss in the game, and you shouldn't try that area until you finish at least
Yeah.
the shrine, like the Ashen Shrine. So I'm sorry to take us on a detour there,
No, you're good.
All
but
right.
this game it's not linear, and I
Right.
think that maybe is a testament to the developers that you can beat anything
If you put if you
that early
if
in
you
the
have the
game.
resolve.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean it sucked, but I fought I fought
Yeah.
Dark Souls bosses for way longer and
True.
been way more frustrated than I was with Martyr
So,
Tarsus. So I'll let you take the reins
all
again.
right.
I won't, because I did a similar thing where I immediately I did beat Grisha because Grisha was like right, and I was like, this is very clearly to me the first boss. I watched the premonition, so I know that there's another vessel or another shell like right behind this boss fight. I fought him a few times. One mechanic we haven't talked about is parrying. If you go to the old prisoner, he gives you like a parrying room, and it actually feels really nice. And okay, I'm gonna say something, and I'm gonna hope that I'm not just completely wrong because I'm gonna be really frustrated.
Go for it.
There is not a refillable healing item in this game, like an Estus flask.
There's
There's
not.
not.
Okay, good, because I looked for one forever and then accepted that it didn't exist, so I was gonna be really upset if it did. So, you can eat mushrooms to restore your health, and like rats, and I think also do that.
The item shop has a lot of healing items. Well,
Yeah, or you can parry and
and
then
heal.
counter attack, and if you do that, you heal like a decent chunk of based on the damage that you're
But
dealing.
you have to have the gland for it
Yep.
first.
The
What do you
gland
mean?
allows the riposte for the heal. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are you
It,
sure?
it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
The
Are you sure that's
original
not
one
just
he
a
gives you.
default ability?
The original one he gives you.
Oh,
Prisoner.
Oh,
okay,
really?
right off the bat.
Yeah.
I thought he
Okay.
gave you a gland. I don't know.
So that's its own story because I didn't even know the prisoner was up there.
Oh, well,
'Cause
yeah, you missed out
I
on
went
that,
in,
yeah.
I talked to Sester Janessa, and then walked out, fought the Gresha, and was like, "Oh man, screw that!" And I went and grabbed my soul thingies, and then left. And I played through over half the game without ever parrying, and
Yeah.
was like, "Man, this is hard." And then I learned how to parry. It was like,
That's why you had trouble with Grisha then, because
Yeah,
Parrying is
Grisha
key to
is
beating
Rapaz
Grisha.
school, yeah.
yeah.
But I finally beat Grisha.
Hmm.
Good first boss. It took me like 6 or so tries. And then I immediately went, I don't know, either left or right. I don't remember
Yeah.
which direction. And I
All
was like,
right.
awesome. We're just going to follow this path. Sweet. There's a cool tower here. Oh my gosh, this game is impossibly difficult. All these basic enemies that there's 6 of them in this area take 8 or 9 hits from me. This is dumb. But I worked so hard to get here and I can't warp back, so I don't want to go
Hmm.
back. And I was really close to just being done.
So,
Wait, did you find Aerodrim then? So you went to like the Eternal.
I went to the Sea of Infinity.
Oh wow.
That was
Yeah.
my first location. So that hammer dude shows up, and I'm like a little jerk, and I hit him, and I was like, oh no, I'm in danger. But eventually, I came back, and I ended up going to the Shrine of Ash, which I think is really the area you're supposed to go to first. It's like the easier area.
that seems to be the easiest one out of the three
So
other
was that
areas.
is that
So,
where you went first, John?
so I think we'll go through kind of the path that I took, and then we can go over each of the areas
Yeah. Sorry.
specifically.
Sure,
That's
no, that's
that's
totally
fine.
fine. It just
I do like hearing about the different paths that we've taken so far because we all did it differently, and
yeah, and I mean that's like
mine
our
was very
experience at the
similar to
beginning of the
Ryder's
game.
though. Yeah. So as you can tell, you can go wherever you want, and that's exactly what all three of us did. So, but I did misspeak earlier. Actually, Grisha was not my first boss. It was the first boss I found, and I went in there. I died a few times, and like Ryder, I was like, "This is a little too difficult for me. I'm gonna come back later." But I did run past him and get the shell that was behind him.
I didn't
So,
even think about that being an option.
so that's where I was at my run, just running past him. But the very first boss that I did was a mini boss. You would find it crawling through some of the tunnels in Fulgrim. This was Ven Noctica Noctikagu. There we go.
Yeah,
Perfect. Which was a what is this enemy
it's a
called?
Resident Evil
Gross
enemy.
vampire
Yeah,
dude
vampire like
thing.
enemies that jump at you. This one's a little bit tougher of a one. Yeah, and how did you guys do on this one? And at what point in your run did you actually find this guy, or did you at all?
I found him almost at the very end,
Oh wow,
and
so very easy for you, I bet.
yeah, I
Oh,
killed him in like 6 swings.
Yeah.
My sword was fully upgraded. I was like full horror. I was like, at that point. So
Hmm.
so jumping ahead, these guys kind of become more common enemies as the
Later
game
on.
goes on, and I had already done that before I found one like hanging out by itself,
Hmm.
and so I just ignored it because I was like, whatever. I've already
Okay.
killed like 80 of these, so I'm just gonna move on with my life.
I'm not doing the named one. Fair enough.
what
Yeah,
isn't he? Is
I
he
don't know
like?
that I
Does he
got
randomly
close enough
spawn?
to it that the name like popped up at the top of the screen. Like I didn't know it was a boss fight. I just thought it was another one of those dudes
He
chilling.
specifically it spawns in a certain location.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
Kurt, this is why you missed the shell. You
Oh,
dummy.
Yeah,
yeah, I'm a
he
dummy.
guards the shell, yeah.
It's okay.
That's fine. Anyway, so that and we're just gonna continue along on my path. So I found that shell and I fought Ven.
Which is Teal the acolyte.
Yep, and we get Teal the Acolyte. And at this point, I followed Ryder's path and went to the abandoned chamber. So specifically the abandoned chamber, which is the first room in the Crypt of Martyrs. The enemies you fight in here are the lesser vampire-like enemies, and then some guys that have weapons all over themselves that they pull out and throw at you for some reason.
They're also Resident Evil enemies. They suck.
That's exactly what I thought when I seen them. They just reminded me of something from Resident Evil.
They kept if you get them close to dying, they just rip their head off and throw it at you and poison you, and
Yeah,
there's nothing you can do about it. It sucks. I hated those guys.
There is.
you could
I mean,
run.
I know there's items that can heal your poisoning, but
I just
like,
ran from them when they threw it, so I didn't get
See,
poisoned.
you harden right before they hit you, and so you take no damage. And if you've already healed up or like prepared yourself with the mushrooms, then you
Mhm.
don't take any poison damage either. And after they hit you, you let go of the harden, get the last swing, and then get like 70 experience extra out of them
Oh,
because you get the
nice.
last hit on 'em technically.
Oh, that's smart.
And then when you get further down in this area, you actually find some more difficult enemies that I don't recall the name of. But there were two of them in the abandoned chamber.
Crabman.
Yeah, crab people. And that's when I fought those, and I was like, those are a little too difficult for me. I'm gonna go somewhere else.
I did the
After
crabman.
after I
They're not
fought
crabmen.
Hey Dern again. Yeah, they just crawl on the ground and very weird like, and then stand
They
up.
have big claws.
Yeah. So
Okay, I believe you.
anyway, so I decided that I didn't want to fight that again. So I fought Hadern for the
Oh,
Martyr's
thank God.
Blade, which is the big sword you have to double hand. So what did you guys think of this weapon, the Martyr's Blade?
I
Yeah.
So,
believe in starting weapon superiority.
Okay. Okay. So just wanted to check on that. I did stick with the starter weapon. I did try the Martyr's Blade, but it was just too bulky for me for the playstyle I wanted to go for.
It was
I
too slow.
also did the starter weapon until the end. I went to
Well, I think we're 3 for 3 on that then.
the Crypt of the Martyrs was the last location I went to, and
hmm
so it was the last weapon that I got.
You were like, I'm not switching now.
And I didn't actually get it until my way out because I tried to fight him and I couldn't beat him, and I was like, I don't care about this,
Right.
so I'm gonna come back later. So I got the gland, went and fought him. I think maybe I got it on the way in, but I don't. No, I got it on the way in, but it wasn't leveled up, and my other sword was maxed out. So I was like, I'm not gonna go into this new area with a new weapon. I'll come back and grind with it. I got enough stuff to max it out while I was in the dungeon, max it out, and then I used it to make it back to Fallgrim. And I really liked it for that run because it made it really easy to fight all those scary enemies because it was so strong and had such good range.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm not trying to like rush ahead and get there, but I tried to
That's fine.
use it on the final boss because that was literally the only thing left, and it was way too slow. So I switched back pretty much immediately.
All
Yeah.
right.
But it was fun to use. It has a really cool move set.
Okay. Gotcha. And then I believe close to there you also find Eredrim the Venerable, correct? That's the guy with the crown, the shell.
You find him outside of the Steve Infinity Tower.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, okay. So that's actually coming up here soon for me. But after having some trouble in the abandoned chamber, I decided to just go back and try Grisha first because it was so close to the Fulgrim Tower that I just thought logically that was the boss I needed to beat, and I thought I might get something for it, and I needed some practice in the game. So I did learn how to riposte that fight, and I got really good at it for that
Mhm.
specific fight. Um, then Kurt, I believe you already talked about Grisha and how you learned some riposting for that too, and
Yeah, the counter system's a lot like the parry counter system's a lot like Sekiro
mm-hmm.
in that way,
Okay.
where you counter it or you parry and then the red dot appears and it's not a death blow the way it is in Sekiro, but it's a really strong attack.
Yeah.
Um,
hmm
I got good at using that against the bigger enemies in Fallgrims
Right.
that would really toss you around if you weren't careful.
Okay.
But
And
it
Ryder, you said that you ended up not fighting the Grisha right there, which makes perfect sense. You can just go past him for anything you really need, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't even bother doing that. I ran in, I fought him the first time. He killed me pretty quickly, and I was like, I'm not ready for this yet. And I was trying to play the game like Dark Souls at that point, and
hmm
I still didn't know the gameplay loop, and so I got killed, and I ran back in because I noticed there wasn't a fog wall. There's nothing keeping me from leaving.
Right.
So after I got killed, I ran back in, grabbed whatever my nectar or tar,
hmm Yeah.
one of
yeah,
the
your
two,
tar.
Something like
and
that.
then ran back out and was like, I'll deal with that later.
Okay. All right. So that's our second mini boss that we've encountered on my playthrough, anyways, since we're trying to keep it in semblance of order. And next, this is where I just wanted to throw in. I had beaten Grisha, and I took a break from playing because I was like, I've gotten good. I actually killed a big boss. I'm so proud of myself. And so that's the point where I decided to finish the very last boss of Elden Ring that day because I had some free time. And after the amount of awfulness that was. I'm not gonna say how long that took, a long time. I came back to this game and I was like, I can take any of this now. I finished Elden Ring. I can take any of this now, and I carried that high with me through the rest of the game.
Nice.
So, with that, that was a precursor to what I did next. That was surprise. I went to the Seat of Infinity, and that brings us to the first area, which I believe is just Eternal. That is the first.
Eternal Narthex.
Oh yeah, my bad.
Made up words.
Eternal
Actually, I
Narthex.
don't know. That might be
Yes.
a real word.
So what did you guys think about this area? Does anyone want to give it a very good description that I probably couldn't pull off?
If you've ever played Kingdom Hearts 2, it's like Castle Oblivion if Castle Oblivion was black instead of white.
Hmm,
It's got really cool, like hard geometric shapes. A shiny stone. There's a red and gold kind of
very
not a
large
sun, but
enemies.
like a sunset kind of gleam in the sky, and pillars and spikes just jut out in all directions. And there's like teleporting pods and
Hard hitting enemies.
really hard hitting enemies that wear super cool clothes. This was my favorite area by far. It
Okay.
looked the coolest. I liked the lore of the characters there.
Hmm.
It was super cool.
Okay. What about you, Ryder?
It,
What'd you think?
I liked it.
Hmm.
It's very visually striking. Um, I had my graphics maxed out, and this is one of those places that really makes the game shine. And I mean, props to the developers, because I was able to play this in ultra wide, and even FromSoft, for some reason they removed ultra wide support in Elden Ring. I don't know why. It's literally coded into the game, and they removed it. So thank you, developers, for allowing me to actually use my monitor that I paid way too much for. Um, but this is one of those areas that really showed off like how beautiful this game could be. Um, the location is just so, like I said, just visually striking. See like these weird polygonal shapes just jutting out of the walls and floors and stuff like that. And the from the description of what we kind of got from Sester Janessa about this place, it's like, yeah, it's kind of unraveling here. The way she kind of describes it, and what I saw reminded me almost of um you know underneath Firelink Shrine in Dark Souls 1, or like kind of like the end of the world in Dark Souls 3 right before you fight. It's
Yeah.
like when everything's folding in on itself. That's kind of what I got here. It was their interpretation of it. And see, this was the last area I played.
Right.
So it really fit with that theme to me. It was like this world is slowly unraveling, it seems here, because of, whatever. Now, I didn't understand the lore of this game, and that's crazy. Like it was so confusing to me, and I did not have the effort to go and get all the shell
That's fair.
like unlocks to try and understand it. But
Hmm.
it's a cool area. I like it. It might be my favorite area visually, but it's so long. It is
It is.
It is
such a
pretty long.
slog, and there's for each of these areas you have like 2 points to stop in, like checkpoints.
Hmm.
So I mean, if you get killed along the way, you're
Let's
screwed.
start
I was
over.
playing as Aerodrim at this point, and
Hmm.
he had such a large health bar. The only reason I think I did not have to restart this area even once. Anyways,
Okay.
I liked it though.
So that brings us to the main beginning location of the Seat of Infinity, and within here you can do the fight for the hammer and chisel. Did either of you even consider using this weapon at this point? Because I sure did
I
not.
I
It was
did the
so
fight.
weak.
I did the fight, and then I equipped it because it was the first weapon I unlocked.
Hmm.
And then I said,
Nope.
absolutely not, and then immediately put it away.
It was just
Um,
so weak compared to the starter sword.
I'm sure it would have been good if I had it leveled up as like a level 5 weapon. But when at that point I already had a level 5 weapon, I was like,
I
I'm
had
not gonna learn this at the end of the game. So
I had a +1 weapon at that time, and so there wasn't
uh,
much difference, but it was just so weak. I was like, nah, I'm good.
but
So,
this was the area that I found the anvil that you use to level up your weapons,
hmm
and I was losing my mind because I just didn't see the one in Fulgrim. Like I explored everywhere and like talked to the people, I just missed it. and so I had plenty of materials to improve my weapon.
The acid.
But the quenching acid, and then I had whatever the special items are that give it special abilities.
Mm-hmm.
But I just didn't know what to do with them, and so I'm like fighting my way through Fallgrim and the outskirts, dying over and over again, forcing myself to master the parry against these enemies just to
Mm-hmm.
survive. And I finally make it there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, thank goodness, I can level up my sword. And I immediately went to like level 3 with the sword,
Okay.
and it made it so much easier. And then we found Aerodrim outside. Aerodrim was my favorite vessel, by far. It's just the kind of character that I like to play. Tanky, hard hitting. That's why I considered using the Martyr Sword, because that's,
Master sword.
yeah, the Master Sword, because I typically like slow, heavy, high damage weapons in these
Mm-hmm.
kind of games, but it was just a little too slow.
So is that
But
who you guys used for the rest of your playthrough once you got him was Aerodrome?
that's who I used.
So I'd kept out Horus
Mm-hmm.
like I don't even remember when I did it because again I played this game so like
Right. Off and
topsy
on.
turvy,
Yeah.
Well, by the point that I beat Tarsus, I had way more experience as early as I actually was.
Mm-hmm.
Is essentially I should have fought him later in the game, but I fought him so early that I had way more experience and everything else. So I ended up capping out Horus, and I played as him throughout like the rest of the game. And then I got to the very end because this is my last area, and I got Iridrim, and I literally had like 15,000 um experience souls nectar or whatever I needed to
Right.
use, and was like, oh, why not? I'll try him. And I ended up really, really liking him because his
Mm-hmm.
ability to, as you kill enemies, it stacks
It's
damage.
so good.
Oh god, I got to like 140 before dying, and I mean, I was hitting your base enemies and just killing, and like the huge towering guys with hammers, hitting them like 3 hits and killing them was just ridiculous. And of course, you have to completely relearn the character though if you
Mm-hmm.
die, because now you have to like, okay, no, I can't kill this guy in 2 hits anymore. I have to kill him in like 6 hits, so I
Right.
need to like play more cautiously. But it's really fun though, having to like constantly readjust to the character.
Right. Okay. Just curious
I
about
didn't
that.
finish the game as him.
I used Teros for the entire game. I tried the other ones for a little bit, but ultimately I used him for all the big boss fights and such. So in the Eternal Narthex, we have the requirement of what did we have to do exactly? There were three is equivalent of
Yeah,
Lanterns.
3
beacons or
torches we had to
lanterns,
light.
torches, okay. And we had to find throughout the area to light to open the gate, um, and to get into the next area. Um, were either of you like me when you lit the first one that was on the center of the bridge? The ghosts immediately murdered you because you weren't expecting it, or just me?
No, I got lightning fast reactions.
I teleported away from that and found one way later. And so I did it completely out of order and then ran around after I finished all 3 and then ran around for like 40 minutes. Like, what am I
Mhm.
supposed to do? I know there's something. And then was like, oh, hey, there's a platform right here.
I have a kind of rule when I play Dark Souls like games and Dark Souls. Whenever I do an area, I like to make sure I kill every enemy at least once. And I did that basically for all of the Eternal Narthex for like the main area. But after those ghosts killed me, I was like, I'm just gonna go find those other two. I'm not fighting
Yep.
everything in between those. I just ran to them, got them, and kept going. And I'm glad I did because I counted the enemies, and there was just
It was a
way too
ton.
many compared to all the other areas in the game. But I didn't know that at the time because this is the first main area I did other than the abandoned chamber. So I just kind of ran past them. I was like, "There's no way I'm doing all of the. I'm not fighting all of these one by one."
I think part of that is map design
Hmm.
because this area has such just different map design from everywhere else
It's
because
vast.
the
Yeah.
other 2 areas are fairly linear with maybe the occasional branching path, but for the most part, they send you down this hall. You can always see only 1 or 2 enemies ahead of you, and there
Hmm.
might be another 2 or 3 behind that corner, but you know that pretty much you're right here. Versus this, it's pretty much just an open room with the occasional object to kind of block view. I think that's part of why it just the whole area. The first half feels so big is because it's just open
It's
floor.
basically a labyrinth with some
Right.
sections having walls blocking you off and others just having chasms.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a while to find all the torches.
Right. Okay. So, once you have lit all three of those torches, the way to the dim gate, the next area, opens up for you. And this is the area where I did not bother trying to kill everything. I just ran through it. And I am proud of that decision and I will stand by it because I counted the enemies. There were over 60 to get to the next area. And I'm not fighting 60 of them that are all next to each other and ready to brutally take you out, especially whenever it has you climbing up a vertical tower. It basically had a spiral staircase that you had to go
Yeah,
up.
that part was
I just
rough.
ran through that and eventually found a shortcut that lets you go up and down, and it made my life a whole lot easier. So,
I totally sympathize with that because I play Elden Ring like that, where I was like, I'm not gonna do this. I'm just gonna run past this part. But with Airdrim's ability, where anytime I kill an enemy, it stacks and I do more damage. I'm like,
hmm,
if I max this out and then get to the boss, then the boss is gonna be a breeze. I'm just gonna like
Mm-hmm.
beat him down. And so I did go through this entire area once I got past the torch part, killing everything. And there aren't many places to like rest, but there's an elevator in the second section, and you can
hmm,
like loop back around.
right,
So you don't have to do the whole thing in one chunk before you get to the next resting place.
right. Um, it's something we haven't brought up yet, but you kind of alluded to it, what you were just saying. His ability worked great for this area, you said. We picked him up right before we started this area, and every weapon you get for an area, all the upgrades for that weapon are in this area. So, for example, the hammer and chisel, all of its upgrades are in the Seat of Infinity area. And like Kurt had said, his ability worked great with the enemies and getting ready for the boss. So I thought that was a really good design standpoint. How they were making sure that the characters you were unlocking really fit the area to
Hmm.
coincide with that.
And they also, like you talked about earlier with the premonitions, like they have lore reasons for why these characters are there as
Hmm.
well that you can kind of discover as you unlock things on their skill tree. Can we talk for a second about the level up system?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
It's not like a typical RPG where you put points in the stats and increase your abilities. It's more like a skill tree, and you spend tar, which is the equivalent of souls, and then you also which is a secondary.
Insight from Bloodborne.
Yeah, it's like a secondary currency that, in my opinion, just kind of makes it harder than it needs to be. Because it's to me, it's a little bit unclear. Like when you die, you lose your tar, but you don't always lose your glimpses. And
I
I
think that
never
really
got,
is like a Bloodborne.
never lost
You
my
know,
glimpses, I think.
but you don't
no,
need but
you
you don't
don't
need those
lose
in
glimpses.
Bloodborne to level up. You
You
need
know,
them
I do agree with that.
you
Yeah,
need them to do like certain optional things, but you don't
yeah.
need them
And
to
you can
level up.
buy like weapons with them. You can buy costumes, but yeah,
That's
no,
true.
you don't have to have them. Though you could play the game with just your base shell, and I bought I fought some bosses with my base shell, but it's so hard to do that.
Yeah.
So no, I do get that. Yeah, I think it's more frustrating after I finished Harris's character,
Hmm.
and I have literally 15,000 tar, and I have like 12 of these glimpses, and
Yeah.
and you can't buy them as
You
far as
don't
I could tell.
and you don't accrue them at the same rate. The only way you can get them is sometimes enemies drop them seemingly
Mm-hmm.
randomly, and then you can also use like consumables to get them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Anything else about the leveling system there?
I mean, it was fine. It was interesting getting the lore tidbits. I've once I got Airdrum, I just stuck with him, and he had like four abilities that I thought were really good, and then the rest of them I kind of forgot were there. Just kind of good for him because he has some passive abilities that are really nice. Like if you get knocked out of your shell, which instead of dying, you have like 2 health bars. After you lose your first health bar, if you get knocked out of the shell you're using, if you can return to it, and then it restores your health. After returning to your shell, the next attack you deal does like massive damage. Like
Yeah.
things like that were really nice. Looking at Harrow's and Solomon's, a lot of theirs were like if you harden at this exact time and attack after dodge rolling this direction, then they'll do a special thing that will stun enemies for longer. It's like I no, I'm not
Yeah,
gonna do that.
that
I'm
was
just
my
gonna
thing
swing
with
my
some of
sword.
the abilities where I before I buy any of them, I always make sure, am I gonna remember to do that? If my first answer is no, I don't buy them.
Yeah, it's
I
like
think
oh, go ahead.
you go ahead.
I was gonna say it's like in God of War Ragnarok,
It's
the skill
exactly the
trees
game
in
I was
it,
thinking about. Yeah.
and all the skill trees like start with like is like 5 or 6 basic abilities, and then after you get that, you can get the next one and the next one going down in the line. And one of the very first abilities is like swing your axe when you dodge back at a perfect time to do a special attack. And then there's like 5 or 6 other abilities that branch off of that. And I never spent a single skill point
Hmm.
unlocking any of those because like I will never do that ever.
Right.
I was going to say that I think I don't remember most of his abilities because I think that was kind of a problem that most of the shells had from what I looked at is they might have like three the really really good, and then the rest can just be absolute trash. And like Harris was one of those that like I think his ability to regain stamina when hardening, great ability.
Yeah.
Like especially when I was talking about treating the game like a dance, the combat, because if you get really good at the kind of like the physical side of like playing the game, and you're playing and you feel the vibration of your controller, so like, okay, I
Hmm.
can harden again. And you just keep track of that along with your stamina, everything. I know it's so satisfying, like swing swing swing
Right.
swing, I'm out of stamina but I have
Yep.
harden.
Get your
Yeah,
stamina back.
recharge.
Yep.
Exactly. Roll away. Swing, swing, swing. Hardens back, harden, and like like I said, that just back and forth, back and forth. It's so satisfying once you learn it. And Horace's abilities, oh gosh, it's like I said, it's so good. Being able to stack the kills. Also just
You
giving him
mean
like a
Aerodrome
base,
or Aerodrome,
Aerodrome,
whatever.
and giving him like an additional 15%
Mm-hmm. He already has the
health.
highest health in the game, and you can
Yeah,
extend it even further.
Teal has a really cool one that's if you're sprinting, it doesn't consume any stamina. Like that's something that like it seems kind of small, but I like doing like the running and jumping attacks,
Yeah.
and that'd be really helpful for that because you're not at any penalty for starting that running attack really far back. Um, I think ultimately all these level ups really work well together. I think it's well crafted out. And initially I was a little annoyed because you can't live up your stamina. Harros is locked in. He has his stamina. You need to learn how to manage it because you're not getting any more. It can kill you 100%
Oh yeah.
if you're not very careful with stamina management. But I think that really adds to the game. And again, for a game of this size, as short as it is, I don't think they really needed to give you anything more. I think it's fun having to choose. Do I want Aerodrome that has tons of health but no stamina? Do I want Harris or Solomon who are like middle of the road, or do I want to go the opposite end with Teal, who is like 2 hits away from
Yeah.
dying but has so much stamina that you can just. I
Put
think
in the
he
work.
feels more like Bloodborne or Dark Souls than any of the other shells by the way he plays because his role is so good. I didn't play him but for a few minutes, but it was very satisfying. But again, I'd already conditioned myself to different combat style at that point, so I couldn't go with him.
Right. Okay. All right. So that brings us back to the dim gate. And yeah, so this area we already talked about. There, you're climbing up a tower, and you're getting to higher up in this. I'm just gonna call it a castle. Just seems like a big castle. Sure, why not?
Library, come on, man.
Yes, but eventually we do get to
Archive,
the
rather.
castle's archive library, and it is in
Castle
ruins,
Oblivion.
and you have to make your way through it till finally you see a giant sister Geisha on the side, and she's just comically huge. It's
She
great.
scared me. It was pretty great.
I was awesome. I was
Yeah, it was
like,
great.
whoa, it's
I
so cool.
I literally got really excited when I saw that. I was like, this game's doing some cool stuff. This isn't just like a hard game just to be hard and weird. Like there's some
Right.
neat ideas happening. Um was it did you guys take it just because you're at the point where reality is kind of bending and breaking and tearing apart and that's why and I think she even says something earlier on like,
Mhm.
hey, everything's not like it appears, like keep your wits about you.
Yeah.
And she just shows up and she's giant and does not acknowledge it. So did you guys take it like this is just the dimension dismantling itself? Everything's fine.
I just
Yeah,
went
pretty
with it. I
much.
didn't even think twice about it.
You're like, yeah, sweet.
I'm like,
And like
great. I don't have to do that again. I'm here.
that really worked for me being again, this is my last area of the game, and again, kind of talking about how like Dark Souls 3, how the world is literally collapsing in on itself because you have
Right.
all the timelines and worlds interwoven. So like that's kind of what I was taking this from inspiration of, is like as the path is it's starting to break apart, but the further in you get, the more these roads start to go their own ways, and seeing her massive like that just kind of fit into the idea that this world is collapsing in on itself, or maybe collapsing outward like a bubble exploding almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I thought that was cool. Again, I don't understand any of it, but
You
it
just
was
took it
cool
for
though.
face value. Okay.
Hmm.
So we are now at Giant Sister Isha, and
Vanessa.
yes, that too. And there's a big face on the wall, like right over there. Very weird. And you go over to it. There's a chalice in front of it. You grab the chalice. You turn it up to drink it, and you plummet to the floor. And as you do so, your first, or my first big boss, Ryder's last one, and Kurt, when did you do this one?
I did this one second.
Kurt's second boss is Crucix the Twiceborn, and I already knew from that name he was gonna have a second phase, and I was just not ready for fun that was about to occur for me. So, I'll let one of you two start and tell me about your experience with this main boss, and then I'll go last. If anyone has anything to say.
Go for it, Ryan.
And describe the
So
boss for us, please. Well,
this is why I think the intended order of this game. I think again you can play this in any order, but I think there was an intended order
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
because there's a story that kind of plays out in each of these areas, and it kind of fits the idea of a beginning, middle, and end. And I think the first is going to be one we'll talk about later, is Ashen Shrine, or Flame Shrine. I can't remember the exact name.
Right.
And then the Martyr's Shrine, and then the Eternal Narthex is, I think, the last area. And I think this because it completely subverted my expectations, because
Mhm.
I'd already done two different temples where you grab the chalice and you drink the chalice, and then you drop it and you convulse, and then it sends you to this like dream like sequence where you're like, I don't know if this is real or not, but I'm about to fight this boss and potentially die. But this, you finish it, and then after you finish drinking, you collapse, or the floor collapses, and you end up taking like, I took like a third of my health and damage,
How was that all?
and
Nice.
well, I was playing as Iridrim at this point, and I wasn't at full health, and I was really expecting to almost die based on the height, but that completely subverted my expectations. So I think that was supposed to be the final, to be like,
Yeah, I
you
think
knew
so
it was
too.
going to happen the first, second time. Now it's third, and nope, we're going to yank the rug out from underneath
I
you.
was
But
just surprised.
it was, yeah, I'm sure you were. And then the next one, you're probably like, hey, I ain't drinking that.
That's exactly
Let's
what I
do
did. Yeah.
it. But so I was already trusting at that point, and like I said, just ripped the rug out from underneath my feet. But as
Literally.
after you hit the ground, you take X amount of fall damage depending on, I'm sure, the shell you're using. I went ahead and healed because I was like, well, I know it's coming. But I was expecting a dream sequence, which is, again, I think reality is kind of ripping apart at seams, because this is the only major boss fight that doesn't have some sort of like dream sequence,
He
or
shows up out of the floor.
yeah, like you walk a little bit further and the guy's like, all right, here we go, door open, and a red skinned enemy starts showing. You see his feet. You very clearly see he's dressed in some like,
With a shield.
Greco-Roman like, clothing with like shoes, the strapata like sandals and stuff, and you see him like banging a shield, and you see he has his two arms out it, and the shield is banging, and I'm like, how's the shield banging? That's kind of weird. And then for some reason, again, this is so weird to me because this is at the end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
After I played this very, very serious game, this shows up, and it just completely, it's like 1:30 in the morning. This happened last night. So tonally, my brain is just like, what is going on? And the shield moves out of the way, and Homeboy has a conjoined twin that is the size of like probably
Child.
like a 1.5-year-old child coming out of his
He
chest.
looks like Brock from God of War, except he's red. That's what the little twin looks like.
I could see
Okay.
that. I could see
Yeah.
that.
But
So
it's really weird, like tonally, because again, the dude is like little conjoined twin, like, come on, let's whoop him, and it's just like, what is going on right now? Again, like this whole thing has felt like a fever dream because it's just so late for me. And seeing
Yeah,
the little conjoined twin brother be
just
like,
sticking
"Come
out.
on,
Yeah.
let's whoop him."
Can I jump
So
in real
weird.
quick?
It was like a moment of comedy. Yeah, yeah.
I just wanted to say that whenever he came out and started banging the shield, I was like, I love that design so much. And then he lowered that shield, and I was like, oh my god, I hate it. What is this?
It's horrifying.
Yeah,
Kill it,
I
kill it.
yeah,
when he showed up, and you're right, he is like just tonally. He looks like he's from a different game. It's
right.
very strange. But he came out, and I was like, "This dude is weird. I like this dude." And then I read his name as Twiceborn, and I just kind of like leaned in on my couch, and I was like, "There's a little dude behind that shield. Like this is gonna, or like he's gonna be like behind him or something like that." Like I knew there was gonna be a second head on that dude. I wasn't expecting a little tiny
Conjoined person.
gremlin kind of guy.
Yeah. All right. So I believe that was a great introduction and descriptor for Crucix the Twiceborn. So, does anyone want to go over how that fight went for them?
Easy.
Yeah,
Easy. Okay. Easy
it
for
was
you
fine.
as well.
He uses a spear, so there's a lot of range, and
I
that
love his
was
movement. Yeah.
challenging at times. But he also telegraphs consistently. It's not like some enemies where their attacks are really quick and have similar animations. It was really easy to learn his pattern. And you talked about him having 2 health bars, which he did, which every boss almost in this game does, which is
Surprise.
which is not my favorite mechanic. I would rather just let me know if it's gonna have 2 health bars. Just let me know
Mm-hmm.
because I manage my resources differently. And sure, there's like the surprise the first time it happens, and like I guess there's an emotional response that they want to get out of you. But all it really does is it makes it harder to win your first time, like
Mm-hmm.
artificially makes it harder to win your first time because you come back and the knowledge you've gained is, oh, he has a second health bar. Like the second time you fight him, you haven't memorized his pattern yet. You're still mostly reacting and learning, but you know he has a second health bar, so you're going to try to be a little more
Conservative.
conservative and dodge more and save your resources. But anyway, that's just like a pick.
And I'll disagree, but I'm not going to get into it right now. We'll do
All
that
right.
off camera.
So,
It's
mm-hmm.
I was just gonna say it's really sad because he does have 2 health bars, but his first health bar is the little dude,
Yeah.
and you just murder the little dude, and then he just gets really upset that his
Brother
brother, I guess,
Yeah,
has to
is
be.
his twin.
is just dangling there, and then he like
Goes
gets
rage
really ticked
mode.
off, and you have to
Yep.
fight him again.
I was so incredibly sad and just confused. And
Just
again,
jiggles there.
this is now like 1:33 in the morning, and I'm like, I don't even. Is this? Hello. This is still happening apparently. I was just, like I said, I was actually like physically like a little distraught when it happened. I felt my like stomach kind of sink
Mm-hmm.
the way he's like hanging there loose, and I was thinking like, how horrible is that? Like it's horrible enough. I've heard that like losing a twin
Yeah.
is worse for a lot of people than it is, anything else. A sibling, a spouse, a lot of times. But thinking about it being a conjoined twin, it's just like, oh my gosh, like this is horrible. And then it's gonna go like start rotting in your chest, and then like dude was dead either way, even if I
Yeah.
didn't kill him. So it was
Just
mercy at
walk
this
away.
point. I had to finish it. So
Right. So, let me tell you how my endeavors with Crucix Twiceborn went. So, this was the first big boss that I did, and I didn't have any real abilities, maybe have one or two. So, when I fell all the way to the bottom with Harrows, he immediately dies. So, I thought this was intended behavior. I did not know that other people wouldn't die. I thought I was only allowed one life against this guy. So I was like, all right, I got this. So it took me a few tries to get the first phase taken care of, and then I was completely sad whenever I hit the second phase. And then I did it once, I died, and then I did it again. And I got down to one hit remaining on me whenever I made it to the second phase. I did the second phase as a no hit, and I whittled down his health. I looked at the video, looking back. That fight took 11 minutes because I could not take a hit. The second half
Wow.
took 11 minutes. I was doing
Dang.
so little damage to him because my sword was only a +1.
Mm.
but I did
That's
it.
how my fight against Tarsus was like. We'll talk about that later. It was like a 20-minute fight because every single swing had to be so intentional.
Right.
And again, that's maybe good game design because you
Yeah.
can beat this entire game. It's not like Dark Souls where like if you want to do like a Soul level 1 playthrough, like
Hmm.
you can do it, but it is miserable, like
Right.
absolutely horrible. But this, I think it's much more doable, but it's not going to be fun if you have to play the whole game, with unupgraded equipment.
Right. So that 11-minute fight for me, I was so ecstatic when I got it done. Like I said, or like Ryder had said earlier, this really felt like a dance as you do these combats, and this is the one where that really kicked into for me, especially that second phase. I could not take a hit. It really felt like a choreographed dance. We were going back and forth. We had the rhythm, and I took him down. I was so excited. My birds probably heard the shouting when I said "Let's go," with probably an obscenity in there, but we won't go over that. And then you go and rip out a gland from something.
The teeth.
The teeth
It looked
of the
like a
skull.
bug,
Yeah, I was very
kind of.
confused when I grabbed that. And then my character lit up and was glowing like a beacon. And then I had to do that all over again to leave.
And then the fog set in.
Exactly.
Right.
So,
So
go ahead.
on the escape journey, so again, my first was Tarsus, and it was miserable getting down to Tarsus because all the enemies dealt poison damage. There were ghosts that, like, one of them just killed me in one hit. These big armor dudes that had shields that were just such a pain. And so, whenever I finished that boss and had to leave, it's such a good like a gameplay mechanic because the enemies actually turn to face you.
Yeah,
Like that they're aware like you are an intruder and we are not going to let you out. And
stole
that's
the
really
gland.
cool. You feel that. However, I was so tired at the end of every one of these areas.
I ran
I
through
went, yeah, and I ran through until I
everyone.
hit Sister Janessa and I was like, "Hello, babe, let me
Save me,
heal," and
please.
then started running. I only fought when I absolutely had to if I was cornered or something. And there were a couple of times where I got like knocked out of my shell, and there was one point where I had like 8 enemies around me, like this,
Yeah,
and I was like, trying to hop back in my shell just to run again. I really did not want to have to redo any of that.
like a snail. You lost your shell. You got to get back in it really quick.
Exactly, just like that. Hermit crab.
Yeah, that too. All right. So, yeah, I did not do any of the areas again. I ran through them. I was like, once is enough, except for this
Yeah.
area where I didn't really do it the full thing once, but okay. All right. I won't tell anybody. Anyway,
I,
so
I did.
go ahead.
Once you get back to Fallgrim,
Hmm.
if this is what you're going to talk about next, all the same enemies are replaced with
The
easier versions
vampires.
of that vampire Ben Noctivagu guy.
Hmm. And they're
And those guys are
everywhere.
legitimately scary.
Yeah.
They're also legitimately obnoxious. Like after the third one, you're like,
It's just
okay,
tedious.
I get you have a 4-second attack animation that I can't skip because I'm bad at dodging and counterattacking. It's fine.
Right.
Not
So,
as a scepter.
Because you don't want to lose all the like materials that you have. Because I found myself a lot of times carrying around thousands of tar
mhm,
because I didn't have
Mhm.
enough to get the ability I wanted yet, or I didn't have enough glimpses. But I still didn't want to lose it for when I did get what I needed.
I understand that. So, a mechanic we didn't talk about. Fulgrim has these frog statues that are locked
Oh yeah.
that you can only open while the fog is there, and the fog shows up when you steal a gland from the heart of one of the other areas, or if you turn it on after you get your first one. So,
Mhm.
um, all I did for the to collect all those, I just ran a circle, a big circle, and collected all the frogs that I kind of remember where they
Mhm.
were, and that's what really helped me jump forward with my quenching acids, and as well as doing that first big area. So after this, I had like a +3, +4 weapon or
Mhm.
something, and the rest of the game was just like smooth sailing. So after that first one, I was high off of the Elden Ring victory. I just beat this guy, no hitting the second phase, so I was just ready for the rest of this game. I was like, let's get it. I have the upgrades I need now. Let's go.
I think that it's like astounding how much of a difference it is going from like one quenching acid to two. Like one, you're like, oh, that's kind of noticeable. Then you get to two, and you're like, oh wow, that's nice. And by
Hmm.
three, you're like, I can deal some damage now.
Finally.
And man, by the time you hit 5, it's like the game is actually almost comfortable to play because
Yeah.
there's a lot of moments where like anytime there's a swarm, it's potentially going to be the moment that I die. It doesn't matter that there are a whole bunch of drunk like rednecks out here in the swamp.
Right.
If there's like 3 or 4 of them, there's a good chance you just
Mhm.
because when you're not
Mhm.
dealing that much damage, and again your health is set where it's at, your stamina is set where it's at. If they start like juggling you, like
Yeah.
it gets really scary.
Mhm.
Um, and
Right.
I think that like that's something that, like I said, it really gets better. And having aerodrome, it's so nice
Mhm.
because it encouraged me to go and farm those areas like early in the game to stack those the multiplier to have like 130 kills, and like you're just swinging, you're killing everybody in one hit. It's so satisfying. The power scaling is very comfortable by the end. And again, I think it's everything's well intentioned and fits well for a game this
Mhm.
short. I feel like I have to keep on mentioning that's like a big consideration for like the mechanics. Everything's designed around a very small world with a very short amount of time you're going to
Mhm.
spend in it.
Right.
How
Okay.
much time did y'all spend in it? Do
11
you think
hours.
11 hours?
Mhm.
I was
At
probably around
least
there,
12.
12 or 13.
Mm-hmm.
I have my exact number, but it's around 11 because I have the video from all my playthroughs, so we could have it for this for this video.
Right.
Um.
To jump back just real quick,
Mhm.
did you guys meet Brother Corvid at the last area, the Sea of Infinity?
Not that I
Yes,
recall.
I met him again. That was the last area I went to. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's kind of important. Did you free him of his?
So for context, John, there's an
Mhm.
NPC who's just chilling on a ledge at like the top of the tower, and
Mhm.
he's basically like, I'm gonna jump, but I'm a coward. And if I only ever approached him as Aerodrim, and apparently he and Aerodrim have like history because he's like, oh, it's you. He like recognizes the shell you're in, and basically gives you the option to free him, which means to kick him off the top and kill him, or to I don't remember if it's like spare him or something.
Mhm.
And I spared him, and he was like, it seems you've changed or something like that. I think I'll just sit here and ponder a little longer. And then I just left it at that. What did you do?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Yeah, I didn't do it.
Okay. Yeah. So I saw him hanging out there, and he's like, "Yeah, go ahead and kill me, man." And I was like,
All right.
"Well, that escalated," because I knew it from when he was on the tower, and he was like, "You smell like fog." And then he cleared cleared the fog away for me, which I hated the fog every time I went through it.
Immediately.
Absolutely
Yeah.
sucked. So I would always be like, "Please clear the fog for me," and he'd be
Oh,
like, "Yeah,
that's a
sure,
different
here you
dude.
go."
That's
Is
a
it?
different dude. Yeah,
Hmm.
the guy at Fulgrim Tower, his name is Festus. They're
Okay,
both
that from
they're both
behind
dressed very similar in
they
like
have
black
like
robes that cover their
ropes.
faces.
Yeah, so they're wearing black robes covering their faces, and they have ropes like wrapped around them. So I
Yeah,
just assumed it was the same guy when I saw him. I thought he
they
was
might
like,
be
"Just go
from the
ahead and kill
same
me."
like order or troop, but
They maybe they're both
they're
a part
different
of the
characters.
same, like a part of the eternal Narthex. But anyways, I didn't kill him, and he was like, "So you've changed?" Then I was like, "Bro, I don't even know who you are. Like,
I,
what are you
I
talking
don't
about?"
even know who you
It's
are.
exactly how it played out because I was like, I mean, I thought about killing him, but I was like, I don't want to have to deal with the consequences right now.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to finish the game at this point. I have no health, and I know the boss is like right there.
While we're talking about NPCs, John, did you meet Gorf, the
I don't.
frog?
No.
He was the
Really,
best character in the game.
Oh, I
I
apologize
don't
for
know what
that.
you're supposed to do with him. He's a giant frog. I
I
just fed
kept on
him.
feeding him rotten food, and he didn't
I,
do
I,
anything.
I kept. He's just a giant frog you find in Fallgrim in the swamp, and you feed him a bunch of food. And every time you stop feeding him, he's like, I guess I bored you. I'll have something more entertaining next time." And he never does. And if you feed him boiled frogs, then he attacks. He sends frogs to attack you. It's
The
pretty funny.
kamikaze, like
Wow.
you, so like he kills more frogs in the process. I don't know what he was thinking.
I was just wondering. I'm trying to Okay, so apparently, if you feed him certain combinations of items, like 1 rotten food and 5 roasted rats, then he'll give you
Oh, like pickle pea
shades,
pumper 'em.
which I don't know what those are, but he'll give you
Pumper
items
rum.
if you give him certain foods.
Okay. Huh. Interesting.
Anyway, I
I didn't find
completely
either one of
derailed you,
those.
John. I
That's
apologize. You're
fine.
hosting. Please
All
take it
right.
away.
So we made our way through the fog and we immediately get rid of it because nobody liked it. And yeah, so at this point, I decided to go to the Shrine of Ash. And that brings us to the temple grounds where I believe you pick up Solomon. Is that right? I think
He's
so.
around there somewhere.
Don't you, I could have sworn that you beat um Grisha, and then in Grisha's like nest is where Solomon is.
There
He's
was
like
one
right
in
over
there.
there, but the thing is, that's like a hub right there because there's literally 4 different paths that
Mhm.
all
Right.
lead to one
Each of the
leads to the Eternal
areas.
Narthex, one lead, yeah, exactly. So
Is
I
this
mean,
so you
he
find him
is
on
right
the
there.
way to this? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
I'm fairly certain, but
I gotcha.
Who knows?
I
hopefully.
This
just
map is
grabbed him.
confusing.
Right,
I
yeah.
just grabbed him and went a different
Let's
direction,
keep
so I
that in
guess I didn't
mind.
connect the 2 locations.
He's the one that mechanically holds the smoldering mace, right?
I never got the smoldering mace, so I have no idea.
Oh, that's fair. All right. So, we're just going to pretend that I was right all along.
Yeah,
We'll see.
that's what I generally do.
Okay, so we make our way to the temple grounds, and yeah, does anyone want to describe the Shrine of Ash area, specifically the temple grounds so far?
It's spooky. There's ghosts and sarcophaguses, or maybe just like
Sarcophagi?
caskets would be more
Yeah.
appropriate.
There you
Um, and you open them and it plays terrible music that makes your wife upset that you're playing a scary game in the living room.
go.
And I mean, it was like dark. There's a lot of fire everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It was a cool area.
Very atmospheric.
This is my second favorite of like the 3 dungeon areas. Um, it's got pretty generic like soldier enemies that are
Mm-hmm.
kind of guarding it, but as you get further in, there's some really crazy dudes. Like there's just these big old Jabba the Hutts that are sitting in these pots cooking and spitting fireballs at you, and those
They
guys are
are
hilarious.
horrible as
They're
far as
hilarious.
like trying to fight against them. They're so annoying, but they're like my favorite enemy design in the
Yeah,
game, though. They're really, really cool.
it feels
And the
like
fact that they don't
if Dark
despawn.
Souls took itself 15% less seriously, they could
Yeah.
design an enemy like that.
Which
Right.
is crazy because some of these areas and enemies feel very much like horror
Mm-hmm.
enemies, like more so than Dark Souls. Which is again why like tonally there's some weird stuff because at some points I'm like, this is almost like genuinely scary. And then, there's the Crucix Twiceborn who's like
Right.
feels like something straight out of
Comic
comedy.
relief, yeah.
Also, that whole I'm sorry, this is backtracking so much. This is gonna be the most disorganized video we've ever done,
It
just by the
goes with the
nature of
game.
what
Just like the
this is.
game.
Yeah.
Exactly. But the cutscene, the second cutscene felt so unfinished compared to everything else with Crucix Twiceborn. How he Crucix was just like all of a sudden like and
Yeah,
it was almost like they attached and this is exactly what they did in whatever programming they were using for coding this game. They like took the camera and stabilized it to his face,
yeah,
so as he was like screaming and making almost no sound at all, the camera's just
Yeah.
like following him down. It's so weird watching it, and like it felt like completely unfinished, and it felt like this whole game was pretty high budget, like game, well made by
Mm-hmm.
this well known studio. You could have just set it me down in front of it and be like, oh yeah, this is some high quality stuff, and then I saw that and I was like, okay, yeah, it feels like an indie game now, just based on how unpolished that was. It's crazy how like that, along with everything else, just kind of took me out of it. It felt like an afterthought almost.
yeah. I definitely see your point. I want to go against the line. It feels like an indie game, inherently meaning it's lacking in polish because there are very unpolished indie games.
Yeah,
There are
yeah, yeah.
very unpolished AAA games. This very much felt like a limitation of what they had to work with, and I think that's totally fair. And you talked about him like screaming, but not the sound not really matching what he was doing. That was
Mm-hmm.
one of my like big complaints with this game was the sound design wasn't very good sometimes. Like pretty much in any game when an enemy attacks you, unless it's supposed to be a sneak attack, they make some kind of sound, and typically it's consistent, so you can like visually see the pattern of their attack. You get the audio cue of when they're about to do a certain thing, and then you can react based off those things together. Um, but there would be times where I would just be like, I'd be fighting a group of enemies, and there would be no sound, and they would just like ganking on me, and I'm just like, okay, I'm facing this enemy, and I know that this guy's behind me, but I'm gonna hear him grunt and dodge, and no, the enemies just don't make sound sometimes.
Because
Or
it's
they'll
a
like,
bad indie game.
yeah, that's where I wanted to go with this. No, it was just weird because whenever like clearly so much time and attention was put into the locations and the art
The
design and the
polish of the
character
marble floor.
designs, the sounds itself was just not very impressive to me. It was one of the weaker points of the game, just sound and music overall.
Okay. All right. So
Fire
Back on
Temple.
track.
back to the temple grounds and the Monument of Ash, and yes, this area for me was a lot easier compared to the one that I had just completed, and I actually did take the time to take out every enemy, explore it very thoroughly. But one thing I didn't mention was this is the area where you can fight Hadern again for the smoldering mace. Did any of you guys consider using this weapon?
I didn't fight him. I was like, I'm not gonna use another. Actually, I don't remember if I intentionally decided to or not, but once I realized that there was a new weapon in each location, I was like, no, I'm not gonna go back and get those.
This was the weapon whenever I watched all the flashbacks or whatever of them walking around. This was the weapon. I was like, that weapon looks so cool. I really want to use that. But whenever
And
I got it and it was in the fire area, I was like, am I doing less damage because this is a fire weapon in a fire area? And I was like, I don't think I'm going to use that. And then I just never went back to it because I already had my hallowed sword leveled
mm,
up, and I was like, I'm just going to stick with this. I know how to use it, and I know how to use it well, so I'm just going to stick with it.
I don't even think the mechanics went that deep,
Hmm.
as far as like
The
weapon
fire.
buffs or like additional damage. I don't think that was the thing. I think it was probably just because it wasn't leveled up,
Right.
and it might have had like a lower base damage. But I really don't know. But I don't think that was like a mechanic in the game though.
Hmm. Okay. So we make our way through the temple grounds and the Monument of Ash, and like Kurt had mentioned, it's full of ghosts and big guys taking baths in lava and throwing fireballs at you. And yeah, so nothing really stood out to me in this area
no,
of
it's
note.
a cool little
Yeah,
ghosty fire
yeah.
dungeon.
And I would say it's very fair with the shortcuts it gives you,
Mm,
especially whenever I did the hardest one first. I want to say anyway. So it felt very fair, and you could loop back around by opening the doors that were locked on the other side. And ultimately, you make your way to the Sanctum of Flame. And this is a big foundry full of a lot of metallurgy equipment, like in lava type scenery. And I felt like this area was pretty short when it led up to the boss. Did you guys have anything to mention about the Sanctum of Flame before we get to the boss?
I think it was definitely the shortest second half
Right.
of an area that we had.
it looked super cool, but it was pretty much like 2 rooms,
Right. Hmm.
and you could just run straight to the boss without much interference from the handful of enemies that were there.
And I was okay with that because
Yeah,
I
Right.
hated the first half of this area. Like I liked
really?
it aesthetically, but the enemies themselves, it was the maybe the gankiest area
That's
for
fair.
me. I
Oh,
I think that what it was, and the reason why I know you're probably thinking that Eternal Narthex was more ganky because of the quantity of enemies,
and the
Hmm.
crossbow cesters.
but it was a very wide area with open layout, like I said, versus this was hallways. And
Hmm.
so a hallway with like 4 enemies in it was way, way more intimidating at that point in the game for me because this is my second dungeon than the Eternal Northex was, where I was dealing, killing enemies because I had a maxed out sword and was using
Yeah,
Aerodrim. So I was killing these enemies, just swiping through them at that point. So for me, I would just feel extremely ganky, and like some of the enemies that like the guys that like spawn in, you see just their eyes, and the rest of the body
Hmm.
materializes. They so much damage. Their attack patterns went on forever, and I feel like when you would harden, it wouldn't stop them. And if it did stop them, it wouldn't be long enough for you to move out of the way after hardening. And if there's two of them plus other enemies, it was a crapshoot for whether or not I was going to get out of there alive. So
It's those guys sometimes not respawn for you. It was
Nope.
like, it seemed like it was 50-50 on if I went and talked to Sister Ganessa
Oh,
if they would be back or not. Like
they
sometimes they just
always
didn't
respawn for
respawn,
me.
but they were the only enemies that weren't bosses that did that. It was weird.
they're always there for me.
I mean,
I don't know. That's really weird.
I made it through that area without having to like redo it because like I felt
Because you're
like
really good at video games.
well for that one specifically, I just didn't feel like I had as much trouble with it after doing that other one. So,
See, the other two took me one try each to get to the end. That one took like 12 tries.
that
I
one
mean,
only took
I was
me, I think, two.
infuriated by the time I got to
It's
the
so
end. I
strange to
don't know
me.
why.
This was the most straightforward one to me.
Right.
I'll talk about the crypt later when we get there, but
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, like John said, there's locked doors, and you go around a relatively linear path. It might branch to get like a treasure, and then immediately go back, and then you open the locked door. You loop back around to the entrance, talk to Ganessa, get your stuff back, and then just go through the shortcut you opened, and then it
Hmm.
stays linear. This was my first full dungeon after I messed around in Fulgrim and the Narthex or Eternal Narthex a lot. I wasn't super high level, but my sword was a little powered up, so
Yep.
I don't know.
I think it's a
It wasn't
good
that
thing
bad
that
for me.
we all had different experiences with it because it just really aligns with the differences, in the paths we
Hmm.
took as well.
Hmm.
So that brings us now to the boss, who is Imrod the Unrepentant. And he is a big hulking man who has a helm on that fully attaches to his metal left arm, even though I just did that to my right one, but it's left on the screen. So. And
What
then the big mace. So what did you guys think of this fight? I fortunately, I believe, made it through. Luckily, my first try, and I was really excited about it. It just built up my momentum to really get finished through the game. So what did you think about the fight?
I thought it was a good fight. It is his attacks again are telegraphed well, and there's a big variety in them.
It was a really
And I really
forgiving
like
fight.
that he has some kind of risk versus reward things where in the second phase of his fight, because he also has two health bars, because of course he does, he like will pick up like the corpses of enemies that have already died, and he'll like set them on fire and basically turn them into fire bombs. But while he's doing that, you can go in and go ham on him.
Hmm.
But then you have to have like a perfect dodge to avoid getting just blasted across the map. And so you make the decision: am I going to sneak in and get some damage, or am I going to use this as an opportunity to like hide behind a pillar so that when he does throw it, I don't have to worry about that damage.
Pillar every time, baby.
Yeah, for
Every
sure,
time.
Could
for
you
sure.
could you not harden when he threw those? It's been a while since I did the fight, so I can't remember.
I think you could, but I think it would also set the ground on fire. So I think
Yeah,
you
I
would
don't
still
know.
take some damage.
I
And
couldn't
I
remember.
sometimes I was, I think I maybe I'm making this up. I think I was knocked out of hardening once
Oh,
or
okay.
twice. Like I don't know that I took damage, but I got hit so hard that I like flew back.
There are
Still,
some enemies that can do that, and
I
it
think
is a
that might
rude
have been one of those
awakening
attacks.
when it happens. You're like, oh, that doesn't work here.
Mm.
Which I think is another thing that I'm not going to say it's bad, but there's a lot of gameplay mechanics that they're not explained
Yeah,
until it happens, and you're like, because during
Surprise.
the Tarsus fight, for example, I thought that so yeah, of course in Souls games, if you try to pause the game keeps running, right?
Hmm.
I thought if you went to your inventory, it was a true pause
hmm,
because it takes up the full screen. There's no like again with Souls games, there's like some transparency, so you can see that the game's still running, or
Right.
you can still hear background effects. But when you open up the actual inventory in this game, all in-game sound effects stop. Well, I was in that Tarsus fight, and the second phase, he had this much health left, and I also had like this much health left, and I was like, I need to be safe. I'm gonna be cautious for once and not try to just gank him.
Hmm.
So I opened my inventory and was about to add a healing item to my bar, and then all of a sudden it kicked me out of the menu, and I was dead, and he was standing over me, and I was like,
that's what you get for pausing.
And that's
yeah,
why he broke one of his controllers.
I was really close. That was the only time I rage quit this game. I
Hmm.
stopped for the night after that because I was like, I cannot keep playing after that because it's already been like 6 or 7 times. But anyways, there's a couple of things like that. Like the game doesn't tell you outright that it's happening until it happens, and you're like, oh, okay, that's how the game works.
Okay, gotcha. So that'll bring us back to Imrod. Does anyone else have anything to say about this fight?
I think it took me a couple tries. I thought it was a good boss.
Mm-hmm.
It was easier than Grisha for me. I
Absolutely,
kind
yeah.
of learned the game a little bit better, a stronger weapon, but it felt menacing. The
Right.
way I thought that a boss of a dungeon like this should have felt.
He was a good boss. It was fun for me. I had felt accomplished when I beat him.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tarsus just made an absolute man out of me because Tarsus was so hard that everything else was just easy by comparison because of how low level I was. I finished just my first try, but I still felt accomplished. It wasn't an
Mm-hmm.
easy first try. I almost died multiple times because I was getting greedy, and fire in this game and
Is deadly.
poison, neither one of them mess around. The
No,
thing is, though, poison, you can get an antidote for that using the mushrooms, but as far as I'm aware, there's no remedy to fire other
I,
than try to take a healing item and don't catch on fire again.
I just rolled around a bunch and the fire would go out. I don't know if
Hmm.
that's a mechanic or if that.
I thought so, but I couldn't tell either.
Yeah.
Hmm. Gotcha. All right. So we made our way through Imrod. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what you were talking about, like vague mechanic descriptions. One of the interesting things they do is every single item you get, it's like, hey, you got to use this to figure out what it does. And on one hand, kind of cool because it makes you think. On the other hand, I did not use most of the items in my inventory because I was like, I don't know what this does. It might be important later. And I just didn't use most of the things that I acquired on the journey.
I just used a lot at once in front of sister. Sister. Yeah.
As soon as I'd get it, I'd go ahead and use it, and I was fine with that. But the frustrating thing was I wouldn't always check to see if it was consumable or not,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd just use it. Like there's like the effigy of Solomon and the effigy
Yeah,
of
I've noticed
Hyros.
those do.
They allow you to turn into whatever shell that is.
Yeah. It's very
That's
Oh,
cool.
really cool. So I used the one. I have one for each. I used the one to turn into Solomon, and was like, okay, that's what I thought. And I was like, all right, I used the one to turn into Harris, and I'd use that. And then I was like, all right, now let me see if I can turn back into Solomon because I actually want to use him for a sec. And tried to use it and was like,
It's
oh, that's
gone.
gone. And that
yeah.
happened a couple of times with consumable items. And like a lot of it, like I just need to know what it is so I don't kill myself in combat. And I
Right.
might have like only found one more of those throughout the course of the game, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that's more to the detriment of it. Like it's fine when you're talking about mushrooms,
Mm-hmm.
but if it's an item that there's like, you know, a very, very limited number of in the game, I don't want to have to use it and then be like, oh, that was a combat only item and now I don't have that
Yeah,
anymore.
for sure.
Right. Okay.
But John, you were
Yes.
saying after we beat him,
You get another gland. Do you get this one directly from him, or do you get it from somewhere else?
no, there's like a gross like Lady of the Forge
Oh
kind
yeah.
of
Okay.
thing attached to a big lava pit, and you
Rip it out.
shove your hand in there.
The animation is really cool because it's
Mm-hmm.
like breathing, but it's having trouble breathing. So it's
Yeah,
like,
it looks like it's in pain.
yeah, it's really, really cool.
Right. Go ahead.
But I would say, as far as like
Okay.
the model itself isn't like super like great looking, but the animation though is like a neat detail where it was good visual storytelling because I don't, again, no idea about the lore, have no clue what
Yeah,
that thing was, but I was like, oh, it looks like it's suffering, so I'm gonna put it out of misery by ripping out its gland, whatever this gland is.
Yep. We freed it of its miserable existence, and then we are now glowing like a beacon again. Fog resets, and we make our way back to the central area so we can defog it, and then head on over to the final area that or I had been to before, but now we're back again, and we
my
are.
final area.
Hmm?
So this was my final area.
Oh, perfect. So we make our way back to the Crypt of Martyrs, and we now trivially make it through the abandoned chamber now that we're so overpowered. Not for you? Oh yeah, 'cause you did this area first, right? Yeah.
This was miserable.
So it's very trivial for me after I came back, now that I've done literally everything else. And we now are going to make our way easily through the abandoned chamber, which has the enemies we spoke about before, the guys that throw their heads, and then the vampires. And we get to the enslaved Grisha. And this is very similar to the other fight with the Grisha. However, there are ice spikes from the ceiling that will fall, and he has a muzzle over his mouth and chains on his body. But it's a very similar fight.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Still was able to kind of counter his overhead attacks
Hmm.
pretty handily. It was a cool change of pace from just kind of. I'm not gonna say I just ran through the dungeon,
Right.
but the enemies weren't really giving me trouble except for getting poisoned every once in a while. And so
That's
this was a
fair.
cool change of pace that wasn't too much of an obstacle.
Yeah, it
It's the
was.
only.
Go ahead.
I would say it's the only dungeon that has a midpoint boss.
Hmm.
Every other dungeon you can just plow
Yeah.
through if you want and not stop. You can just keep running and running. But this,
Hmm.
yeah, you can run and run. And I tried that because I got sick of because that what it was. I cleared out the enemies a couple of times, kept on going back and forth to heal, and I got tired of it and was like, I don't want to have to deal with poison or having to take the antidote. So I'm just gonna take one antidote and just run all the way through,
Hmm.
and then ended up with the cave Grisha, and I ended up beating it, but I was like, I learned my lesson there. I was afraid to do that with the other areas, and it was the only area in the game
That
that
was
had a
like that.
midpoint boss like that. Yeah,
Very good.
So, the differences for me here was I had tried this enslaved Grisha twice before I left the abandoned chamber, and I was just not doing any damage. So I thought I was going to have to rely on reposting again, like I did on the previous Grisha. However, I was doing a ton more damage to it this time, and I didn't have to really rely on reposting, and I just kind of took it out and whittled it down just with standard attacks and such.
is your sword maxed out? I'm assuming both of your weapons are
At
maxed out at
at
this
this
point.
point,
Yeah, at this
yes.
point. Yeah.
So it's pretty trivial compared to when I was here earlier and really struggling. So fighting this enslaved Grisha, and you are now taken to the Enshrined Sanctum. And this is the snowy area of the game, and it's a cave. It's like a Dwemer cave from Skyrim, and but snow covered. So it's a
Really pretty.
yeah. It was I did love this area, and did take my time to go through the area and took out every enemy and explored, make sure I grabbed every item I could. Anything stand out to you guys in the Enshrined Sanctum as we get closer toward the end of the area?
It was
I like
hard.
the shield enemies. I don't remember specifically what I did, but I
They were
got really good at
surprisingly
breaking their
hard.
shield and then just they're hard, but I like breaking their shields and then they're just nothing after
Right,
that. Like you
yeah.
just take them out.
Their whole thing
I
was a
had
shield.
to. So I mean, this is where again, like this game really taught me, like you are not gonna play this like Dark Souls, or I'm going to punish you. I learned that because just all the enemies in this area sucked. It was such a long area,
Hmm.
and I just feel like I just kept on going further and further down. But I kind of learned the usefulness of. Again, I couldn't parry at this point because I didn't think parry was a mechanic. So
Right.
learning the usefulness of harden and
Hmm.
learning to watch attacks and visualize how I would
Hmm.
react. This game is way more about reacting than acting. Like Dark
Hmm.
Souls, you can play a reactive playthrough. You
Hmm.
can play a very active playthrough where you're the one doing the attacks. But this is a game where you have to be patient a lot of times. And it teaches you that at the beginning by giving you the hardening mechanic. But these enemies with the shields, you watch their attacks, you can dodge their what's it called, mace attacks, but whenever their flail, whatever you want to call it, but their shield, if you harden right as they're about to shield bash, it just completely shatters their shield.
Maybe that's what I was doing.
And so that you can break it if you hit it like with your sword enough, but it takes forever. But like learning that was like a game changer for me, and it was like, okay, harden's not a way to block. It can also provide other advantages against these opponents by staggering them, by breaking shields and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
It's good gameplay design.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So we make our way through the Enshrined Sanctum, going deeper and deeper into the depths of the Crypt of Martyrs, and then we make our way to the Martyrs Altar. Does anyone have any recollections about this area before we get to the boss?
This is again my first boss area, and I was like,
Hmm.
"Hey, there's a lady up there," and
Right.
it's also like one of the only times where I think there's like a cutscene that even showed it
Hmm.
to it.
Yes. It really
It's
just
the
led
only
your
one that
attention
did
to
that.
it.
Yeah, it was
Hmm.
like right there. Um, that was kind of cool. Again, this is my first boss fight, so I drank from Chalice expecting a boss fight.
And
I
you
was not expecting
tremble
the
over.
unholy beatdown I
Yeah.
was about to get.
How many tries do you think it took you with this boss that we're about to name for the first time for sure?
Probably about 10 times.
It's actually not that bad.
And each time took it was a 15-minute fight. And again,
Mhm.
I'd already learned at that point, getting down there, how this game was going to be played, and I was going to have to play it very reactively. And so the boss had such a large health bar that I very much had to learn how to
Mhm.
pace myself in
Mhm.
combat. And this is not something I can't just swing and deal damage. It was a swing, dodge. Um,
Mhm.
I'm watching the cat back here.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I'm very
Yeah,
distracted.
yeah, you're good. But I don't want to go into the boss fight yet. I'll let y'all talk about it because I can ramble all night about this boss.
All right. So, as described, there is the Martyr's Altar there, and you drink the chalice, and that begins our fight with Tarsus, the first martyr.
The
And
easiest boss in the game.
honestly, because we both did it last, it was very trivial for us. So why don't you just go ahead and tell us all about it? Because we've heard some precursor information about this from you, but we'll let you deep dive into it for us.
So I had no upgrades on my sword, no quenching acid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'd found them on my way down. I found two, but hadn't upgraded yet. And this boss fight, it was again like the first real major boss fight. There's the enslaved
Mm-hmm.
Grisha earlier, and it's a little hard, but I was kind of expecting, they was much slower, and kind of got the feel for the timing and stuff. But this was my first true boss fight against one of the main three guys,
Mm-hmm.
four, I guess. Um, he, I think this is probably the most Dark Souls ish boss. And just kind of like the way he acts, kind of reminds
Mm-hmm.
me of like almost like the dancer or something like that from Dark Souls 3.
Yeah,
It's a,
I
a
can see
boss
that.
fight that like you can bait him and get him to attack and then dodge and attack in response. But he has a huge health bar. Is one of the I think one of the biggest health bars in the game from just pure health standpoint. I looked this up afterward
Right.
because
Mm-hmm.
I was genuinely curious, and I think he's like the second most as far as health bar in the game. And the phases I think between each of the bosses are a little different, but I think this is the most drastic between first and second phase because first phase he's very aggressive and he'll skate towards you, literally just like zoom
Mm-hmm.
towards you and give like a good swing. And
Like Ornstein.
he he has an attack where like he stabs to the ground and it creates this vortex, and if you're within the vortex it's going to damage you.
Mm-hmm.
And the ice damage deals tons of damage. If you back too far away from him, you hit the outer wall, it deals tons of damage to you. Um, so with again limited stamina, you really have to work hard to balance your attacks and dodging, especially when I have a sword that's not upgraded at all. So it took probably like 100 swings to kill him at least. And once you kill him, the second phase begins, and that was I think it was very effective in demoralizing me. And I do agree with Kurt on the whole idea of resource conservation and stuff, because I had mushrooms are really only source of healing in this game other than rats. I had like six going into this fight. I used all six, and so phase two starts, and I'm like, oh, here we go. And phase two is just completely different in the way that he handles you because he's way more evasive. And in phase one, you bait him. In phase two, he baits you. And you can kind of learn how to like treat the AI, but like it wants you to swing at him. He keeps just enough of a distance that you can't hit him. So if
Mhm.
you swing at him, he's going to go in. So you really have to like learn again, like this dance. Like you might go in for a swing to bait, you know, dodge backward, and then do a like jumping swing to like
Mm-hmm.
come down on him. But it took me, like I said, probably like 10 tries before I finally beat it. But I was just my mind was blown. I was like, this game is so hard that I have no clue why they would allow me to fight this. And again, it's because the game allows you to go in any order.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna say it's a bad thing, and it is doable. I've proven that, at least for this boss fight, and the fact that John went through Eternal Narthex. I don't think that boss is as hard as this, and that's from my
Mhm.
experience.
That's fine.
So that's of course potentially wrong, but I can say that area is harder at the very
Right.
least.
That area
But you
was
were
harder.
you were able to do it.
Right.
And I think that I'm not going to say it's good or bad. It's very very different. And again, this is where I had like really this whole area, this boss fight, everything is what really made me realize this is a Souls like. It is not a Souls game. Mechanically, you feel it. I felt it more here than in any other place because I had to completely rewire my brain because it feels similar, but it is not at all the same. But overall, it was a good boss fight. I felt accomplished by the time I finished it. Um, but I was not prepared at all.
Right. Okay. Kurt, any thoughts about this boss?
It was a really cool boss fight. I agree with what
Mhm.
Ryder said about the second phase being really unique because the other bosses, they kind of just get angrier and get a couple new moves. But this one, um, I actually don't know if we know the gender, but I said she when I was fighting her.
Mhm.
So we're gonna go with that. She like obscures your vision with like snow, like it's dark. There's a blizzard. She kind of disappears and flows in and out. And like Ryder said, she starts to bait you. So it's not just that her attacks get stronger and she gets a couple of new attacks. It's just her entire method of dealing with you changes completely, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is a much more interesting way to have a second phase than to just be, ooh, now it's more dangerous, but it's still the same. So I really enjoyed this boss fight. From Ryder's description, I can see how it could be really frustrating, but also really epic fighting it at a weaker level. But this was a one try thing for me just because I was
Right.
so strong at this point.
Same here.
And I don't know that I saw a lot of the stuff that you saw just because, like, I never saw the vortex attack because I just ran up and hit her a bunch, and then her second phase started.
The fight that I finally beat this on was at least a 20-minute fight, like maybe 25 minutes. I
I
mean,
think I
it
did
was
like
a solid.
7 minutes for both phases, and I was just out of there.
Yeah, it's pretty quick for me, but
I think the only
yeah.
reason this game took so long is because I spent so long on this boss fight, and again, this area is buried like deep underground. There's no like teleporting system or anything like that. Again, the game's very small. They're like
Mhm.
mechanically that would probably break the game if
I
you can just teleport. But
I looked it up. I think there might be a way to teleport like mid game, like you can unlock it, but I never figured it out.
Yeah, I
But I
didn't get
looked
it
up if
either.
you could, and it was like you have to get this item from this location. I was like, okay,
Mhm.
I'm not looking at that. I
oh,
just
I
wanted
think
to know if
there's
you
like a
could,
mask maybe that you
Yeah,
could use.
there is.
So
something
Yeah.
like that.
I, real quick, talking about hidden mechanics. Not really a hidden mechanic, but just things that the game does explain to you. So I've learned that you can take damage while in the inventory menu. I also learned that you can take damage while in hardened form
Hmm.
in this boss fight. I learned that, but only from ice damage, as far as I can tell. So
Interesting.
the vortex attack. So I went up and I started just waylaying on them while they're doing their vortex, and right before the damage was about to kick in, I was like, well, I know that I'm about to start taking damage. Let me harden. Well, I harden, and I see that there's the black bar or my health bar is grayed out, but I can also see that it's shrinking. I'm like, what is going on? And then all of a sudden it hits zero, or hits like depletes completely, and my character just dies. And I was like, what? Because
Maybe
up
it,
until that point, you're not really told that that's a thing.
Hmm.
yeah, maybe it's like hardening. The I think the verbiage is protects you from the next hit, like from
Hmm.
damage on the next hit.
It's not
Maybe
physical damage,
Yeah,
so
maybe because it's not something that like counts
Right.
as like a physical hit, it just hardening does nothing. It
hmm
just kind of seems more like an oversight than a feature, but maybe it's on purpose.
regardless, that was one of those things that again just added to my frustration.
Yeah,
This
sure.
fight because I was already so peeved, and that was just another thing. And I was like, this game's broken. I hate it. But after this fight, the game started getting much better for me, and I enjoyed it
Yeah.
by the end.
So that brings us to finally defeating Tarsus the First Martyr, and we receive our crystalline gland, and we are now shining like a beacon. Fog is back, and we can make our way back to Fulgrim Tower. And it is at this point for me that we can turn in all the glands, or if we've been doing it one at a time, turn in our third one to our imprisoned friend.
I would, I was
Go
gonna
ahead.
ask you about that actually
Mm-hmm.
because I never died while I had a gland because when you have it, you're like glowing.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feared that if you died while you had it, then I don't know, maybe the enemy that killed you would have it and you'd have to go get it back or something like that.
I don't think so.
Okay. So are you saying, John, that you didn't turn them in immediately?
I did turn them in immediately, but I think you
Okay.
didn't have to.
What about you, Ryder? You didn't know the old prisoner was there.
I didn't, and so I think I didn't find him initially because I don't remember a bell ringing.
Mm-hmm.
But when I came back after killing
Yeah.
Tarsus, the bell was just ding ding
Yeah,
ding, and I was like,
that
"What
the
is
bell wasn't
happening?"
ringing beforehand.
So I ended up walking up the stairs that are there. That somehow I remember seeing them, but I avoided. I really thought I went up them at some point. Guess I didn't. But I went up them, talked to homeboy. He was like, "Yeah, you smell like fog," and got rid of the fog for me. And then walked around the corner. And was like, "Oh, what's up, Birdman?" And
What the
and
bird
also
doing? Yeah.
cool design. The fact that he's like got the chains that are like he's actually ringing the bell
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
doing his head. There's a neat little detail.
Yep. So, the old prisoner, we give him all three glands, and with that power, he is able to release himself from captivity, and then
For
he
some reason.
tries, yeah, now he begins to attempt to ascend. But unfortunately for him, he discovers that he is not the one destined to do it, for it is us, the foundling, who is the one that is destined to ascend.
Whatever
And,
that means.
and at that point, he becomes hostile toward us, and we begin our final boss fight of the game. So, would anyone like to take over and describe this? Go ahead, Kurt,
He's a giant bird
with no
and
legs.
he attacks and he sends little dudes to fight you, which is kind of annoying, but it's the final boss, so it's reasonable. Died a lot of times, little dudes, and sometimes when he gets to half health, he creates a whirlpool with a giant hole in the middle. And he eats the little guys that he sends
And
you and heals
heals.
himself with
Yeah.
those. Which again, final boss. Okay. Um, if you fall into the whirlpool, you die instantly, even if
Oh,
you're on your first shell. Um, is this is this on?
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Insta death attacks are bad, and they should not exist in games.
That wasn't an attack though. That was
What do you
you
mean
not
it
seeing the
wasn't an
environmental
attack?
threat. It was did he actively hit you with a hole in the ground? No, you
He,
you
yeah,
fell into the hole
he creates a whirlpool that you're
that
trapped
you
in.
ran into.
So,
That's like
that's
saying he's just sitting there swinging his blades. You just ran into him. It's not.
If he's standing there stagnant swinging blades and you run into the swinging blades, you ran into the swinging blades.
What if he's got like? What if he has like? What if it's a vortex attack where it pulls you in and does damage to you? It
That
pulled
map
you
was
in and did damage to
massive.
me.
I
It's
I
just that the
don't know.
damage was insta death.
So I can't speak to how the attack works because I only had to fight him one time and only saw it that one time. But I was under the assumption that that whirlpool just spawns in the middle of the map and that was it. So I was completely outside of it and I just sat there watching it like this and then was like,
oh, he's going up in health.
yeah, again, this is like now 2:20 in the morning and I'm like,
Is that going up?
yeah, and I watched it go like, and I was like, "Oh no,
Oh no, he didn't.
we're not doing this." Because I had like two
Yeah.
mushrooms left, and thankfully I still had still had both of my shells, or I hadn't like had to die yet. So I ran up and started killing them, and it was sucking me down, but I think he ate like the last guy,
And it
and
closed.
it closed up. So
Yeah, it
if
does.
I don't know if I would have been able to get out of it or not, but I was kind of worried about getting it sucked
You
in. So
you can get out of it. That I learned to do, but it sucks you in. And if you want to stop him from getting health back, you have to be in the vortex, killing the dudes
Mm-hmm.
before they
yeah,
fall in, and then you can kind of like sprint your way out of it slowly.
I killed like three or four, but he got like probably 30% of his health back before I
Yeah.
realized what was even going on.
I
Because again, the
almost,
map's massive, so I was on the opposite
yeah,
side, just like
Sure.
waiting for it.
I almost beat it the first try until I didn't know that, and then he got a lot of health back, and he ultimately got me. But it took me a few tries after that to really get successful in the fight again, and it really became another dance, as we spoke about before. Really choreographed patterns there that I really got down on when to harden, when to dodge, when to miss those waves, and how to miss the waves, and ultimately made my way through it. Not too terribly. I'd still say the first fight when I wasn't leveled up was the worst out of all of them.
Did y'all have the spike in your sword?
Yeah.
I think so,
Were
yeah.
y'all using that actively?
Yeah.
Oh
Apparently,
yeah,
does
I
more than
did.
him
Yeah, I
every
did.
time. It was great.
And say that's what
Mass,
I
yeah,
constantly use
massive.
that. This fight was a game changer. 'Cause I think that I probably, if I didn't have that, I probably would have had to do it a couple of times. But using that stagger and then going in and just waylaying on him, building back some of that resolve, and then using it again.
Yeah.
And this is the thing about the items, because there were so many different ways to combine items
Mhm.
that I don't think any of us probably used would have made all of our gameplay easier. Because there's an item that you can use that kicks you out of your shell, right? But there's another item that you can use that will give you your uh like remove that separation. So it'll give you
Mm.
another chance.
Yeah.
So you can get full health and just another attempt at using your shell that you
It's
could have
really
used
cool.
in boss fights.
Mm.
There's another item that you ring, it's like a bell, you ring and it gives you like full resolve. And like those are things like you could set to your toolbar, use
Mhm.
them and just stagger attack, swing, 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 stagger attack, swing, swing, swing. And I'm not going to blame the game for it because that's on all of us probably for being greedy. But I do think the mechanic of you having to use the item first kind of is like a detriment in that
Yeah.
way because it didn't encourage me to experiment because I was like, oh, I'm going to hold on to it just for right now. And the game's so short, you don't have a
Right.
chance to really get to use them before they're over with. I think subsequent playthroughs, if I choose to do that, it will make a bigger difference though.
Right. All right.
I'm so glad that this boss didn't have a second health bar
Yeah.
because I kind of powered through this whole game in a weekend a few weeks ago,
Mhm.
and then I got to the final boss and I lost like 5 times in a row with even getting him to half health. And I was like, I'm done. Like I'm not gonna do this right now. I couldn't. I was getting overwhelmed by all the extra enemies that were showing up. I couldn't figure out how to dodge the second wave. Whenever he would do like the two like rings of waves coming out, I eventually figured out how to survive that, but it was really annoying. Um, so yesterday I picked it back up because I knew we were recording today. I was like, I
Mhm.
gotta beat this boss, or Ryder will not stop giving me crap about it
I
ever.
would not.
So I did, but I literally like I did my last hit, and he immediately started talking, and I was like, if you say some dumb Shakespearean anime nonsense
And then show back up.
and then glow red and refill your health bar, I'm just gonna put the game down and I'm gonna text John and say, sorry, I'm not gonna be on this episode. It's just not gonna happen.
I
Um,
wouldn't have grilled you at that point since you'd gone through the effort. I would have grilled you, but I would have left it alone.
Fair
did
enough.
any of you guys have just horrendous visual glitches during this fight? That's one
No.
of the reasons it was so hard for me. Maybe it's because I was playing on PS5, but like 50, man, 30% of the time. So I probably fought him about 10 times total. And 3 or 4 of those times, it was just wild flashing lines of like blue and gray and white, like across the screen in random directions
Never
constantly.
had that problem.
Like the skybox was just random, like static, basically. And then sometimes the boss would just turn invisible. And I'm just like,
That would make the fight harder. You're right.
yeah. Or sometimes he wouldn't turn invisible, but he would just turn into like a flat texture of just that static.
Never had
Or
that problem.
sometimes he would. I thought he had like a different version of his wave attack because sometimes he would only do one wave instead of doing two. But then I realized no, the second wave just didn't load in as a model, and so I'd just be running towards nothing and then just get thrown back and take a bunch of damage. Um, that's part of what made it really frustrating for me. But I got a few good runs yesterday, and I was able to beat it on like my fourth try, I think.
That's
And
awesome.
I think it's a good boss fight, though. I think the patterns are recognizable, but there's enough variety that it keeps you on your toes. It's not like the fire guy, the underpent boss, who had
Right.
like 4 main attacks and then like got a 5th or a 6th one. This guy had a lot of attacks, and but they were all well choreographed.
He had
And
10 of them.
did you just looking at a list?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I really like this boss. I think this was a good boss overall.
Oh.
I'm done.
I'm just poking my teeth.
All right. So
He's aight.
we successfully make our way through this boss fight, trivially for all of us, clearly, and we now have the choice to ascend and end the game. And that is immediately what I did. I didn't go do anything else. I immediately was like, I'm done.
So if you choose Ascend, do you rip out his gland?
I can't recall.
So that's that. Okay, so I was really annoyed because I chose not to Ascend, but it gives you the option like, do you want to rip out his gland? And I was like, well, yeah, I'm gonna rip out his gland. And then it was like, do you want to Ascend? And I was like, no, I don't want to Ascend in case I want to go back and do some other stuff before I do a New Game Plus. I don't know if I'll ever do that, but there's no animation for it. I was like, what? No, come on. You've shown me these super gross animations of everything else, and now the final boss, you're not going to show me ripping his
I don't
gland
recall.
out?
Do you remember? Well, Kurt, do you remember what happened right
I
after you
chose
did it?
not to ascend
Oh,
because I enjoyed my time with the game, and my thought was, if I want to come back and do some of the optional stuff, I don't want to replay the whole game, much less on
Mhm.
harder difficulty. So I'm not going to go to New Game Plus to make this
Yeah.
happen. I'm pulling up a cutscene right now to see like what the decision is. What did you choose, John? Did you ascend?
I think either way, it's just
yeah. I
straight to credit.
immediately went to New Game Plus. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm watching the sequence now.
I thought you did,
Um,
but I can't recall because it's been a few weeks since I did it.
Yeah, I
so
did it
if
last
yeah,
night,
I'm
but
watching it. If you choose to ascend, he's like laying there. You go up to his throat and just like
Rip it
right
out.
here,
Now
just
that you
like
mention
man,
that.
I
Yeah.
hate
tear it
that.
out,
That sucks because I was
and
really
then
wanting that. That was so
and
disappointing.
then you slam it to the ground.
And you ascend.
I'm just describing this in real time. You wash your face in the water. You start to glow, and then you hug yourself.
You can watch it right here, guys.
You strip off your shell. You dance a little bit, and then you get water boot powers, and you fly up into the sky.
And then credits roll.
I'm just gonna believe it.
I mean, I'm
Yeah,
telling
You can just watch
see,
this video because it's right here.
I just got credits. That's all I got. I was so disappointed. I was thinking like, Dark Souls, all of those games, Bloodborne, even if you choose not to New Game Plus, they still give you an ending cutscene, and then it sends you back to Firelink Shrine or whatever the hub is, so you can continue the game. And I just the game was just like credits, and I was like,
I got you one even
what?
better, Ryder. What if you spared him so you have to go fight him again?
Oh, that's what I'm thinking. I'm actually kind of afraid of that right now. But we'll see. We'll see.
So apparently, I just looked up a YouTube video that's Mortal Shell all endings.
Mhm.
Apparently, there's another ending where you find this character named Baghead, who's just a guy hanging out in Fulgrim by a campfire,
Yeah,
Mhm.
and
I got
he's
that
like,
ending.
"You got that
Oh,
ending?"
I was terrified at first because I thought I'd actually just quit, like finish the game.
I would have counted it. I'd be like, "I'm done." But yeah, he basically it just you talk to him and a prompt pops up that says, "Do you want to hang out forevermore?" And then you just sit down and play your loot, and then credits roll.
Well,
that's
you walk up
beautiful.
to him and he's like, "Hey man, you got a rat on you? I'm kind of hungry." And you're like, yeah, here's a rat." And he's like, "Oh, thanks. You got moonshine on you. Could I have the moonshine?" And you're like, "Yeah, here's the moonshine." He's like, "Hey, you want to sit and play the loot with me forever?" And I was like, "Yeah,
Yeah,
dude." And
sure.
so I sat down, and you're like, "Down, down, 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 down." And then it like shows like all these like different like areas from the game, and then it gave me the credits, and I was like, "Oh no, no, no!" Because I had just beaten Tarsus, and I was like, "You can't tell me I just beat this boss. It took forever on him. I'm not even halfway through the game, and now
Now I
it's
can't go
over." But
back. Yeah.
Got
it
the
was just a
secret
good way to
ending.
show the credits, and like as soon as like I think as soon as I like hit like start or whatever through the credits, it sent me back to Sister Janessa, and
Yeah.
that was it. But it was a cool little Easter egg, if nothing else.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
really. I'm glad I looked that up because I didn't know that existed at all. That's really funny.
All right, everyone, we successfully made it through the game. So, is there anything you guys wanted to talk about that we haven't so far as we hit our 2 hour mark?
I don't know. This was a hard one to discuss because, like we kind of said, it's not linear. There's a lot to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the lore doesn't always make sense, so it's hard to like really discuss things in like a narrative context.
Right.
Too, and I'll wait for a like little wrap up. But no, I don't think I
Okay.
really have anything at the moment.
All right, Kurt, anything we haven't covered so far?
Not anything we haven't covered so far. I'm trying to find like a one paragraph summary of the story.
Oh, okay.
You won't find it.
It's like a Dark Souls game,
Um,
you gotta find the 10-hour YouTube video that goes over every little detail. But until
so
then, yep, go ahead.
tar is a drug. Okay. Nectar is a secretion of an unborn. I don't know what that means. And true nectar is in a gland. And I think the true nectar makes you powerful. Yeah, I don't know. You should just look it up.
All right.
It was really weird.
Thank you for that beautiful summary. That sounds
You're welcome.
about right for me. So, we've reached that point. We've covered every aspect of the game I can think of so far. So, we're going to get to the backlog seal of approval, whether we liked the game, whether we didn't, whether we would recommend it to friends that like the series, whether we would, not the series, but these types of games, and whether we would recommend this to just general people that we know. So, yeah, who wants to go first?
I'll
Oh,
go.
oh, go
I'll,
ahead. Hit
I'll
it. Hit it.
definitely recommend it. It's very good. You need to get past the opening hours, I think, which isn't dissimilar to most Souls games. You got to get past a little early frustration before you kind of hit your stride. I think it took me longer with this game than most Souls-like games I played, but I will say that besides the actual Dark Souls and Bloodborne games, this is probably the best Souls-like game I played, relative to like Neo, and combat-wise, relative to like Jedi Fallen Order, even though that's a little bit more than a Souls-like.
Okay,
But no, I would definitely recommend this game,
got you.
especially to fans of the genre, which is
We
the
got
most
one.
cliche thing to say.
All right, Ryder, what about you?
Um. So yeah, yeah. I don't know. So on the most simple way, I will recommend it to fans of the genre. If you are a fan of Soulsborne games, I think you can find something in this you will enjoy. If you're a fan of Souls-like games and like the more broader context, things that aren't made by FromSoft, then I think you'll definitely like it because you've probably already played other things. So you're willing to accept that this isn't going to be a one for one. This is its own thing. Um, I cannot recommend this for the general public
That's fair.
because of the reasons that Kurt said. That like it takes a little while to get into it, and when you're talking about a game that is between 10 to 15 hours, depending on how thorough you're trying to be, I can't in good conscience tell someone who doesn't already like Souls games that you should go invest time into this if you're going to spend the first half of it maybe miserable or just very confused.
You,
And
I
go
was gonna
ahead.
say, I agree. You should definitely play like Dark Souls or Elden Ring first, and
Yes.
then
Mhm.
if you liked it, move on to this.
If you're looking for a place to start with Dark Souls 1. Like I can't really give you anything better than
Mhm.
that. And if Dark
That's the
Souls
best
isn't
point.
your cup of tea, then do Bloodborne. And if not that, then Elden Ring is probably the most accessible. I know Kurt doesn't. That's not his favorite, but I think for the general public, I think it's a very accessible game.
Mhm.
But let me go a different way. The reasons why I think it's hard for me to recommend it. Um, I think gameplay is a big reason of it. I think that it is difficult, it is rewarding, but it takes a little while to really learn it and to appreciate the way combat works. I think the map is confusing. I've already explained that. I think that each of the temples themselves, very interesting areas. I think that they are head and shoulders above Fulgrim. but the fact that you spend so much of your time in Fulgrim really detracts from any recommendation I could give this game, because I don't like it. I think it's an ugly area. I think the enemies are kind of boring. The mist makes the area just so much more frustrating. I found myself just running through it rather than trying to explore it.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there are some good things about the map, because instead of focusing on, like I said, like, Dark Souls has this like hub where you kind of know, like, oh yeah, look, here I am, I'm back here again. I went down the elevator, I came up an elevator, I went out this shaft in the wall. This is, you learn kind of the landmarks. You look for the bat tree, you look for the tower, you look for, the frog under here. Like, you look for that type of stuff, you start to learn. And I think that's a good thing that works in its favor. However, it's too confusing initially. That I spent the first 4 hours just very frustrated trying to figure out where I was going. Another thing, the lore. I don't know what's going on for some people. That might not be a make or break. The
Mm-hmm.
gameplay might be enjoyable enough for some people that they're able to just get into it. But I think if I played this game without the knowledge of Dark Souls, I'd be like, oh, cool, wacky. But I felt like it was trying too much to be like Dark Souls with its dialogue, with its description of things, just the way that like they would describe things without describing things. And like, I think the ideas of having these characters, kind of give tidbits of lore and their background and stuff through like the skill tree is a really cool thing. However, after going through all of Harris's school tree, I still have no clue what was going on. And I think there should be at least some sort of sense of completion with him at the very least. Maybe I unlock all of them and they all make more sense together, but I still really don't have too much of an idea about him, and I can feel the influences of Dark Souls in a very negative way in that. Ultimately, though, I think this is a good game. I think, considering probably the resources, the amount of people working on it, it's stellar what they're able to accomplish. I think this is a really good alternative for people who kind of burn out on other Souls games to find something new to play. It is short, so it's not just going to eat up all your time. Ultimately, yeah, it's like probably a 7.5 out of 10. It is
Okay.
a good game, but there are tons of things that could have been done to improve this, and there are a ton of things that were done that kind of detracted from me giving this a full recommendation. But if you're a fan of Soulsborne games, Souls-like games, at least try it out and see for yourself.
All right. So we got a 1.5 out of 3 so far. So I will finally say I do agree that this would not be a game I recommend to people that are not familiar with Dark Souls games.
Sure.
This would be a game I do recommend to people that have played Elden Ring and or Dark Souls games and really enjoy those. I believe this goes in a direction that's similar to those, but chooses its own path and really does a good job of really making a difficult game but a fun game. And I won't rehash all the stuff both of you have already went over, but overall, I'm going to give it the point 0.5 as well. I do recommend it, but not to everybody, just to the people that are fans of these types of games, just because it does have a steep learning curve for someone that wouldn't have played these games normally, and this would be too difficult, especially trying to get through your first area. No matter which of those three bosses you do, it's going to be very difficult for someone that's not familiar with these types of games. So
For sure.
um, so yeah, I'll give it the 0.52. So at that point, that's a 2 out of 3, and I would say that gets the Backlog crew seal of approval. So with
For
that,
fans of the genre, little
yes,
asterisk, little footnote
We can put that
down
there you
there.
go.
there. That's okay.
Absolutely. So anything else that we may have not covered at this point, guys?
No,
All
I
right.
I enjoyed it. Props
Go
to
check it
the
out.
the team again, considering how many people worked on this. I mean, stellar, a beautiful game at some points.
Yeah, I'm
I
really interested to see what Cold Symmetry's next project is. So far, they haven't
Yeah,
announced anything. This game came out
I did go try to
in
check.
2020, but there's no notice. If you go to their website, it's just a Mortal Shell
They
website,
do have a
basically.
lot of jobs posted. They're definitely working on something, but I didn't find anything other than the page on Mortal Shell. So, but with that, if you've made it this far in the video, why not go ahead and drop us a like, and yeah, let us know in the comment section if you played this, what your favorite and least favorite bosses were. And yeah, at this point, thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.